Unfortunately, our souls are at odds, brother. I need more power.
We in too motherfucking deep, y'all. Let's go. For y'all haters.
You pussy motherfuckers cannot fuck with King Hood. We in too deep, we run the motherfucking streets, yeah. We pull that trigger, Joker, smile it, go bang. We pull that trigger, Joker, smile it, go bang.
I'm at your head first. You can call me a crash dummy. Clothes looking bummy. I ain't looking to flash money. I stash money. I ain't spending shit cause I ain't giving. All year round, bitch, I'ma eat like it's Thanksgiving. Can catch me on the block, I'm posted up like I'm Tim Duncan. Paper chasing for the money, just look how the bread coming. I ball like LeBron, but kick ass like I'm Jet Li. I'm on the block, posted with the snow and 2 jet skis. A couple of pounds of weed with no sticks and no stems, no seeds. And automatic weapons that's equipped with the lemon squeeze. They gotta be the greatest and come up with some shit that you won't believe. You need me like a cop, I'm an accessory like Anna Free. Don't play with me, nigga. Like King JJ ain't been bumpin'. Collars and Macklemore, yeah, nigga, we
You think you stand a chance?
It's a straight jet. Engines are overloaded. More power.
We're superheating. Intermix temperature 7,400 degrees. 5, 7, 6, 8,000 degrees. 8,000 degrees above maximum. 8-4. 8-5. 8-6. She'll blow soon.
Now, Mr. Sulu, impulse power 2.
State Gang, the mob, King JJ, Mad, PMP, Gay, Joy Chit Chat, Money Boy Trey. We in too deep. Let's go!
Let's return now to our top story, the continuing epidemic of shootings and gun-related deaths in America. From Indiana to Texas to Florida and many other places, communities, families, and individuals are coping today with the aftermath of violence that remains all too routine.
Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to another militant special here. Shout outs to all the people who's coming into the room. Tanya Renee, Sirius S, Gabe. I don't think I missed anybody. How y'all doing this afternoon? Trying to keep everything on track with what's going on with the team and stuff. It's content that matters. Content that matters, you know what I'm saying? I've been a little quiet trying to get this thing in order because of how they released this. It seemed like they're trying to block out a lot of stuff we ain't supposed to be hearing or things like that. So this hearing goes back about 7 days. I remember when it started, but then after that, it was day after day after that. The middle one, I think, the last one is pretty long that I'm going to end up having to break up, but I don't mind breaking that one up or this one up because this look like it's going to be a good one here, man. It's going to be you're going to see a lot of dumbness coming from people. And they use the shit out of our people, man. Our people meaning black folks, man. I mean, they got these fools on TV looking stupid. This woman couldn't answer one question, but this is LGBT hearing. You know what I'm saying? I try to disguise it so we don't, you know what I'm saying, just boys and women's sports, you know what I'm saying? I try to disguise it in the title because actually we don't want those fools coming over here fucking around with my fucking channel, getting mad because of something we might have said in the chat off the stupid shit that you hearing in this hearing or whatever, you know what I'm saying? We could be just cracking jokes, but we already know that these are a bunch of sensitive bitches in this generation. You know what I'm saying? But with that being said, you know what I'm saying, that's just to keep the people out. That's why I moved type in the chat up to an hour or so. You know what I'm saying? So we don't have those issues. You know what I'm saying? It's a shame that we got to worry about that stuff, and it's a shame our people are supporting this crap and don't realize what the fuck they supporting. They taking away all the people's freedom of speech, but they still hate 45 though. But we gonna get into all of that stuff, boy, because there's some big shit going on and shit that folks don't know what's going on. If they did, it would come up in the conversation and they wouldn't deflect. You know what I'm saying? And that's for a lot of people who wants to keep their hatred going for somebody who never did nothing to them. You know what I'm saying? You can't beat facts. So, with all that being said, this one here is about 2 hours and 28 minutes. I think we could probably get through it with my talking, and I have it speeded up in probably an hour and 50 minutes. You know what I'm saying? Possibly. You know what I'm saying? I might slow it down depending on how the people are talking with the jibber jabber. You know what I'm saying? Some people just get up here, what you call it. You're looking at a black screen right now because I can't figure out what was making me glitch yesterday. And I've been taking this thing down piece by piece. And it's supposed to be another piece to it I'm about to try out real quick. It's supposed to be another piece to this that's supposed to fill in the picture, but I'm not sure if it's actually making the feed mess up. Did it go through? Okay, there we go. It shows up on the screen over there. It's supposed to be the background behind his head and stuff moving along with the waves and shit, but I'm not sure if it's the waves fucking me up or is it that background behind his head messing him up that's causing the feed to glitch. I'm just being too bougie, you know what I'm saying? We lost out on the other, you know what I'm saying, bougie folks in the crew, so I had to become the next bougie guy, you know what I'm saying? So, Mookie, thank you for coming through. Truth hurts. I don't see truth in the chat. Are you hiding? But I'll just take your word, truth. Oh, there she go. Oh, I'm just blind today. Don't pay me no mind. But yeah, this is just another hearing. This one is kind of long. I think it's still going on. But this first part here ain't nothing but about I'm gonna break it down to probably about an hour and 50 minutes or so. But then I think there's another part, and then there was a real long part. It was yesterday. You know what I'm saying? This one gets real good. Like I was saying, there's a lot of dumb people that can't answer questions in this sucker, man. And this shit gets hilarious. It's a shame that it's a black woman. You know what I'm saying? This agenda, you know what I'm saying, this administration is making our people look like fools following this stupid ass shit. It's kind of hilarious too, but you know what I'm saying? Because I can't believe you were raised that way. You just stupid, boy. Hey, where your mama at? But let me see, set this up. And this time I am running the video off a different system. I'm not using it off the same thing that I'm broadcasting with, so maybe that would change up the imagery where it's less glitching and things like that. I think I'm missing the clock still. I haven't put the clock up. I gotta find another place for that. But if you're new to the room, this is a channel that does news, Senate hearings and meetings, judicial, you know what I'm saying, kind of try to stay up on the politics, you know what I'm saying, arts and music and stuff. I didn't get back into my shows as far as the Club Madness opening back up and stuff. I'm working on that on the back end and stuff because I think I'm going to be celebrating real soon this 500 the way these numbers are moving. I want to thank all y'all for subbing to me, you know what I'm saying, having confidence in your boy and getting this job done finally. Yeah, it's just been a journey, you know what I'm saying, to actually find people who actually want to listen to real content. You know what I'm saying? That's no shot to nobody and stuff. I had a long path before I even got to the Snake Gang. You know what I'm saying? So it's been a road, boy. It's been a road. So again, with all that being said, let's jump into these dummies up here on the Senate floor. And this is the Senate. This ain't like the other shows where it was just little committees and stuff like this. This is actually senators and actual senators of the state and shit. You might catch your senator up here. See how dumb he's goddamn talking and shit. You know what I'm saying, on a lot of these topics. That's the best way to really get down to the nitty gritty. The hell with these local news stations. The hell with these goddamn national news stations. All they do is lie to you. You know what I'm saying? All our faces ain't good faces just because they doing the news. You know what I'm saying? You got your Roland Martins and there's other people up out that motherfucker and shit. Like I mentioned yesterday, I seen this dude go from 5,000-6,000 in the room at election time to under 100 people. I can whip this fool right now. So goddamn, that gave me some confidence. Because I knew he was lying then. And he's still up there fucking lying. Race baiting and all. Lying to my motherfucking people. Like a lot of these black folks on the TV doing. You know, they ain't coming out with the truth. They following narratives and putting out their own opinion and making you follow their own opinion just because they got paid on the back end. They need their motherfucking ass whipped, but I ain't gonna get fired up too early. Let's get this going here. Hopefully this will work better than it did yesterday. I still need another wire to hook up so I can get my whole system going. D-Sizzle, Mr. Crystal. Salute, brother. Hope you enjoyed your birthday yesterday. As you can see, I still haven't calmed down yet. I'm still going. I still got the flow going, and it will get worse. Yeah, there you go. So, but you just coming in. This is what's called Boys and Men. What's called, I forgot her name. Dag. The main person that's that this is about and stuff. But this is basically men and women's sports, boys and girls sports. You know what I'm saying? Boys in the girls' bathroom, in the locker room and shit. You know, shit that shouldn't be fucking happening and shit. You know what I'm saying? But let's get this going. Let me know if my music is too loud and I'm using the wrong mouse. I got too much shit going on.
Our nation has seen a wave of anti-LGBTQ bills. More than 525 have been introduced in 41 states, many of them specifically targeting our transgender youth. Some bills seek to ban gender.
Let me know if it's loud enough, you guys.
While others are designed to dictate what sports kids can play or what bathrooms they can use. But all of them are part of the same concerted effort, exercising the power of government to target children. At the same time, leaders on the far right are promoting anti-LGBTQ rhetoric. During this year's Conservative Political Action Conference, one speaker was applauded. We declared, and I quote, "Transgenderism must be eradicated." We must reject this divisive, hateful rhetoric. And at this point,
but give me one more sec here. Let me turn up the volume over here. I don't know why it sounds like it's crackling too. Do I got all my EQs off today? Okay, it's up all the way. Is it loud enough?
and death by suicide. So when these young people who are already struggling hear politicians amplify hateful rhetoric that denies their very existence, what message does it send? We have a responsibility to support all of our children, no matter how they identify. This morning across America, families are meeting with doctors and being told they must make critical decisions, life and death decisions, about surgery and medical treatment for their children. These are personal and family moments which the parents will never forget. I know, I've been there. But increasingly, state legislatures have decided that the decisions will be subject to regulation and criminal punishment by the government. You saw the video of the Missouri father. Does he sound like a rat who is trying, anxious to experiment with the child's future?
It's not coming through choppy?
Sounds like a father who resisted acknowledging the real condition of his child until he realized he was wrong.
Choppy and low.
I'm sure it was a painful process and journey, but convinced he did the right thing for his transgender daughter. Regulating the age when a young person can buy a tattoo or drive is one thing, but making a decision fundamental that could affect the life of an individual should be.
Let me see if I change the pixels. Will it might have to double back and go to the old system here.
Should be viewed differently. Brings me to another reminder. As a member of this
Yeah.
committee, we'll have
Give me
a
1 second. Take a second for this to set up here. Before I do, I just noticed something.
responsibility to engage in discourse. While spirited debate is a sign of healthy democracy, we should not tolerate language that disparages anyone. I'd like to close by saying it's cruel to be
Yeah, that's an issue. I think that's the reason why my game be fucking up too. Whatever that is. Give me 1 sec. Close you out, change the window. That means I'm gonna have to switch everything around here. There we go. Now I have to worry about getting my chat back. So give me well, it's on. Let's roll.
Puberty blocking drugs and surgery is far right. I don't think that's true. I think there are a lot of people in this country very much worried about where we're headed as a nation.
Looked over in the damn
particularly
lights
when
one
it comes to young girls having to compete
Don't tell nobody else.
against biological males. Title IX was passed in 1972 to ensure that women would have a place in college athletics because most of them are non-revenue generating sports. Some generate revenue, most don't. But I think most athletic directors would say that it certainly makes the college experience better to support women athletics at that level. It's a feeder program for our Olympic teams. There's been a lot of success, the women's soccer program, and much of that came from the experience they had in college. This desire to level the playing field for women in 1972 was bipartisan. So now we have an assault, I think, on that concept. You mentioned 8 years ago the Bergefell decision created a constitutional right to same-sex marriage and legislation you talked about. We're not talking about that here. We're talking about other things here. The father who testified before the Missouri, I guess it was one of the House or Senate, seemed very sincere. I don't question that at all. He was worried about something being taken away from his transgender daughter. That's a good concept to remember. Rights of one should be upheld and cherished, but there are limits to the rights of one group versus the other, one individual versus the other individual. Your rights have to be balanced against other people's rights. And here's where I come down on this. You'll never convince me that a biological male who swam 3 years on the men's team and transitioned for the senior year, that was fair. And Ms. Gaines will talk about that. This is going on all over the country. Young girls are working hard in their particular sports, and on occasion they're having to compete against a biological male who has decided to transition, and the evidence, I think, is pretty common sense based that there's an advantage. And at Olympic level, you have to take certain tests for testosterone and other tests you have to take to compete in women's sports because there's a disadvantage. And I believe this debate will go into the 2024 cycle. And the question before us, one of the questions is, is it okay for a state to ban transitions of a minor? And I think it is. I think the state has every interest in protecting minor children and regarding a medical procedure that is life-altering, given the evidence we have about how these procedures work. I find it curious that in Europe, they're beginning to pause, pump the brakes, and slow down laws that would allow minors to be transitioned, because the evidence is suggesting that it's probably not the best thing to do, and they're taking a cautionary note, which makes America the outlier. That's the title of this article behind me. So today we're going to hear both sides of the story. My Democratic friends, if they could, would stop every state in the country from having laws regarding minors being transitioned. I think that's your position pretty much on your side. And on our side, we believe the states have every right to do that. And in my state, they're actually going down that road. So as we celebrate the 1972 Title IX Act reaching 50 years, plus we live in a time where the whole concept of Title IX is very much at risk. We're not talking about equality in marriage here today. We're talking about what are the boundaries, if any, in American society when it comes to minor children, and what is fair to all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Graham. We have 5 witnesses today. I'll introduce the majority witness and ask Senator Graham to introduce his witnesses. Our first witness is Harley Walker. Ms. Walker is 16 years old from Auburn, Alabama. She's here with her dad. She has advocated for trans rights and the importance of access to gender-affirming care in her home state and nationwide. We also have Dr. Jimena Lopez. Dr. Lopez is a pediatric endocrinologist at Children's Medical Center of Dallas, Texas, and an associate professor of pediatrics in the Pediatric Endocrinology Division at UT Southwestern. Our final witness is Kelly Robinson. Ms. Robinson, from Chicago, is the president of the Human Rights Campaign and the first black queer woman to lead the organization. Ranking Member Graham, would you introduce Mr. Sharp and Ms. Gaines?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Matt Sharp is Senior Counsel Director of the Center for Legislative Advocacy, Alliance Defending Freedom in Atlanta, Georgia. He is the Director of the Center for Legislative Advocacy and Special Counsel at the Alliance. In his role, Mr. Sharp focuses on state and local legislative matters, providing legal analysis and testimony how proposed legislation would impact civil rights and constitutional freedom. He's advised governors, legislatures, and policy organizations on the importance of protecting First Amendment rights. He holds a JD from Vanderbilt University School of Law. Riley Gaines is spokesperson for the Independent Women's Voice in Tennessee. Ms. Gaines defends single-sex spaces for women, advocates for equality, stands up for women's safety and opportunities. Ms. Gaines is a former 12-time All-American swimmer from the University of Kentucky and has been a powerful voice speaking out against biological males participating in women's sports. Ms. Gaines has challenged the roles of various sports leagues and travels to raise awareness about the need to protect women's spaces and encourage other female athletes to join her cause. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Senator Graham. Here's what we'll do this morning. We'll first swear in the witnesses, then we'll allow each of them 5 minutes for an opening statement. Then members of the committee will be allowed to ask 5-minute rounds questions of the witnesses. So I'll ask the witnesses to please stand and raise your right hand. You affirm the testimony you're about to give before this committee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. Let the record reflect that all witnesses have answered in the affirmative, and so we can proceed, and we'll start with Harley Walker. Ms. Walker, the floor is yours.
Good morning. My name is Harley Walker. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm 16 years old from Alabama. I want to thank you all for the opportunity to tell you more about myself and what it's like to be a trans person. I'm hoping to share what my journey has been like and to clear up some of
Okay, it looked like we might be back. Can y'all hear me? What this platform gonna end up doing, goddamn, to keep fucking with me, and I'm gonna take my damn shit on some other goddamn platform. I ain't got time to keep fucking with this damn YouTube and shit. I don't give a fuck if they in the goddamn bushes listening either. This shit getting on my damn nerves. The fuck? Maybe they need to do a clean sweep on this platform like how they did with fucking Twitter. Tired of these fools controlling what the fuck we supposed to be saying in a free fucking country. Ain't no other system of mine messing up but the one that I got the studio on. That shit crazy as hell. Ain't nothing goddamn going wrong in my system. Nothing. So it's all YouTube. They lucky I'm not saying what the fuck I really want to say. Make sure everything is clear here. I can't, man, because I mean, it pisses me off when you try to tell folks stuff and they still support this shit when they seeing the damage that's done. This is the reason why we don't know shit right now. You know what I'm saying? Because we can't get the information out. They cover up the information, they chop up the information, they feed it to you some other bullshit way, and then when you try to get it out and shit, you have a motherfucker saying that you goddamn lying, you don't know what you're talking about, it's a conspiracy, all kind of dumb shit. You know what I'm saying? Like, we don't know what the fuck we listening to or what the fuck we looking at, and we try to put that shit in the situations that's going on, and it's like, it's hard to get anything through to anybody. You know what I'm saying? If the proper information ain't out. I'm sick of having those dumbass conversations. It's time to get the damn info out. Shit. Okay. Now it's chilling. It ain't doing shit. I'm cussing up a storm. It ain't fucking with me. Oh, the name mad, it means mad for real, goddammit. Oh yes, anger management don't work.
All of us on how I could get the best healthcare for my situation. The team of specialists that he referred us to were incredible. They focused on getting to know me, understanding my specific case, getting to know my parents, and figuring out how to best care for me as a patient. They advised us at no point would they talk about surgeries on a minor. It wasn't even something that they would discuss. They never pushed any agenda. And instead, one of the things that stuck out to me and my parents was that if I ever decided to stop or change my mind, that it was okay, and they would support me no matter what. This is the opposite of what I hear in the news and in the legislatures. It makes me wonder why legislators think that they can tell my parents and my doctors that I can't get the care I need to be happy and healthy. I want all of you to look at me here now and hear my words. I am a very happy 16-year-old girl. I have wonderful friends who accept me for who I fully am, and I am active in my school's debate team and other curricular activities. I love to travel. I enjoy concerts and music like Taylor Swift and listening to my record collection in my room. I get all A's in school, and I am looking forward to college. I am not miserable in my life. I am not depressed. I'm just trying to be a teenager in America. Same as any other teen, but I keep having to jump through hoops that other people don't have to. I keep having to spend spring break lobbying for my rights to exist while my friends are on vacation. I am here in front of this committee instead of on my summer vacation, just to ensure that my right to exist is not taken away. In Alabama, not one lawmaker was willing to sit down with me and my parents to learn about what it's really like to be transgender. Instead, these lawmakers pushed rhetoric and laws that weren't true and were not logical, saying things like transgender people are being groomed by our parents, which is nonsense. In support of these laws, my governor has decided to say horrible things about me and those like me in my state. I would love for you to imagine a moment if these statements were made about you or your kids. How would this make you feel? What would you do to protect your kids from these harmful laws and statements? If you were me, would you want to stay in a state where the people who were elected to represent you and make sure that you have a safe place to live and instead talk about your family this way? I live only a few miles from the best college in my state, but I can't even consider going there because of the continued attacks against me and my community. I've had to do a lot of thinking about college. Alabama was one of the first states to ban trans health care, but because of the new laws that have been passed in states across the nation and because we don't have the Equality Act to help protect me from discrimination, I've had to start looking at colleges very far away from where I was born and raised. My parents say this breaks their heart. They can't stand the thought of their kid being so far away where they can't help me if I needed them. This type of discrimination, which will make me have to move where I live or work to go to school, is not designed to protect or help me. I want you to understand that discrimination makes me unsafe. This journey isn't easy. As I first began my transition, there was an incredible amount of bullying in my middle school. So much so that my parents decided I needed to go to online school, not because I wanted to, but the bullying got so bad it was getting close to violence and the school was doing nothing about it. We worked with the school and I eventually got to go back, but kids shouldn't feel helpless at school against being bullied or discriminated against just because they are different. Leaders in our state and country have the ability to help. However, so many of them have decided to promote that same bullying and discrimination. Despite all this, despite being called a demon, a monster, or other despicable things, I love my life. I love my family, I love my friends, and I am happy. I am asking for you to help us stop certain people from using the transgender community as a political pawn. Please stop attacking our lives for votes or money. These are human rights hanging in the balance. Help us communicate that they are impacting people's lives and our pursuit of happiness. We are just like your kid, just like your neighbor, and you. We also deserve the ability to be happy. Thank you.
Exactly 5 minutes. Thank you, Harley Walker. Mr. Sharp.
Good morning, Chairman Durbin, Ranking Member Graham, and members of the committee. I'm Matt Sharp with Alliance Defending Freedom. America is a beautifully diverse and tolerant country. People from various walks of life with different beliefs and values peacefully live and work together and care for one another because we recognize the inherent dignity and worth that is endowed upon each of us by our Creator. The Hope Center in Anchorage, Alaska embodies these ideals by serving everyone in the community, no matter how they identify. The center provides women and men with meals, clothing, and job skill training, and at night it operates a women's shelter to provide a safe place for women fleeing sex trafficking and abusive situations. One night, a man who identifies as a woman tried to gain access to the women's shelter. He was drunk and injured, but the Hope Center staff wanted to help, so they paid for a cab to take the man to a local hospital to get the care he needed. Rather than applauding this act of charity, city officials accused the Hope Center of violating the city's gender identity ordinance and demanded that men be allowed to sleep in the women's shelter, just feet away from victimized women. This is just one example of how laws and policies that promote gender identity ideology violate women's rights, endanger children, and erode our constitutionally protected freedom to speak and act according to our conscience. Many of the federal government's rules and positions are driving this ideology. We've seen the administration push unlawful
All right, are you guys buffering on your screen? Because I'm not getting buffering until I look down at my full screen here, which is watching the show. Okay, now I pause and it paused. I think I know what it is. Damn it, and I can't get to it. Oh, it's working fine on your end? Okay, I see what the issue is on my other one. Thank you, Gabe. Thank you. Thanks, Sirius.
Interpretations of Title IX and other laws that ignore the truth of what it means to be male and female. These policies demand that schools indoctrinate students in gender ideology and even hide students' mental health struggles from their parents. They ignore the physiological differences between women and men, allowing males to compete in women's sports. This exposes young women to greater risk of physical injury on the playing field and deprives them of the chance to compete, medal, and potentially even earn college scholarships. Such gender identity policies require that women's facilities, locker rooms, women's dorms, and shelters like the Hope Center be open to men, violating women's and girls' privacy, safety, and dignity. These policies are being used against students, like Liam Morrison, a 7th grader in Massachusetts. Liam was punished when he wore a shirt simply saying there are only 2 genders to peacefully share the truth about what it means to be male and female. In punishing him, the school mandated that students embrace its views on gender ideology and censored any dissent. Such viewpoint discrimination is abhorrent to our First Amendment. And for years, state and local governments have misused public accommodation laws to coerce people who serve everyone, regardless of who they are, to speak messages with which they disagree on pain of investigation, fines, and even jail time. For example, Colorado officials are misusing a state law to censor Lori Smith, owner of website design company 303 Creative, and require her to create designs that violate her sincere beliefs about marriage. Lori, who's awaiting a decision right now from the U.S. Supreme Court, is hoping the court will uphold the freedom of all Americans to speak what they believe without fear of government punishment. But perhaps the most troubling campaign is the push to give dangerous and potentially irreversible gender transition procedures to children. Puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones put kids on a one-way street towards medical transition. They harm healthy bodies, turn children into lifelong patients of gender clinics, and irreparably deprive kids of the chance of becoming natural parents later in life, all with no proven long-term benefits to the child compared with safer mental health treatments. After seeing the poor outcomes and continuing high suicide rates among those who had medically transitioned, many of the European countries that pioneered these procedures began correcting their mistake. They reversed course to prioritize counseling and psychotherapy over drugs and invasive sterilizing surgeries. Yet despite the totality of the best evidence in Europe's example, government officials are ignoring the science and pressuring states, medical providers, and even parents to support the harmful medicalization of children. Knowing this, Congress should reject laws and policies like the Misnamed Equality Act that push a government-mandated view of sexuality and identity, and that have devastating consequences for children, women, charitable organizations, and all Americans. They're unnecessary, unjust, and they erode the true tolerance of differing views that is the hallmark of our great nation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sharp. Dr. Lopez.
Good morning, dear senators. Thank you for the opportunity of being able to speak at this Judiciary Committee. I am here today representing myself and not my place of work, hospital, or institution. I am a pediatrician trained in pediatric endocrinology. I have been providing gender-affirming care to transgender youth for more than 10 years in Texas. I have also published scientific research that shows that gender-affirming care improves the psychological well-being of transgender youth. I am here today to be the voice of my patients and their parents, because in Texas and in other states where bills banning gender-affirming care are being passed, the lives and future of transgender youth are at risk. The parents of my patients are debating whether to flee their state amidst high financial, family, and social costs. The effects of the campaign of misinformation that led to these bills are also having chilling effects beyond healthcare access. My patients and their parents are suffering from discrimination at school, at church, at social gatherings, everywhere. Many families unable to leave the state are pulling their children out of school and isolating them, living in hiding. The general public should know that a campaign of misinformation has falsely demonized healthcare for transgender adolescents, which is based on more than 2 decades of research and clinical practice and is accepted as established medical care by every leading medical organization in this country, including the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Medical Association, and many others. There is no professional medical association involved in the care of transgender youth that opposes this care. Gender-affirming care does not involve genital surgery in minors, and no medical interventions are provided before the age of puberty. Gender-affirming care consists of puberty suppression after the onset of puberty, which then may be followed by hormone therapy in later adolescence. In accordance to the Endocrine Society, the American Academy of Pediatrics, and the World Professional Association for Transgender Health, this treatment can be medically necessary and life-saving. This care is based on a careful, individualized assessment of adolescents with significant and persistent gender dysphoria, which, when left untreated, predictably can cause serious harms, including anxiety, depression, suicidality, and other negative physical and mental health impacts. In contrast, research has shown that when these youth receive the medical care they need, they can thrive. This care is not pushed by doctors or parents. It is a highly complex decision that involves mental health providers, that includes assessing the stability of the gender identity over time, the maturity of the adolescent to assess the treatment. Importantly, the parents I see in my practice, which is true of practitioners across the country, come from all backgrounds, including conservative and religious ones. My patients who are supported by their parents and receive timely gender-affirming care often have no mental health issues, and they thrive. I also want to speak up on behalf of science and medicine and my colleagues. Gender health providers and hospitals are being attacked by extremists. Politicians are deciding how medical care should look like with disregard of patients, parents, science, experts, and legitimate medical societies. Banning this care also risks the advancement of this medical field and its research. This is a dangerous precedent for our society as a whole and harms us all. Banning gender-affirming care interferes with the ethical principles of medicine, which includes patient autonomy and do no harm, and to provide the best treatment available. Physicians are being left to decide whether they should violate their medical ethics or break the law. I ask that the complex medical decision of whether to receive gender-affirming care is left to parents, patients, and their health providers. Thank you for the opportunity to speak and be heard today.
Thank you, Dr. Lopez. Ms. Gaines.
Good morning, Senators. My name is Riley Gaines. I'm an advisor for Independent Women's Voice. I recently graduated from the University of Kentucky.
Okay, this young lady here, this is who, oh, the latency do work. Damn, I'm right on point. I'm about 3-4 seconds off. I like that. Which called, this is basically who this is about here. You know what I'm saying? This woman, Riley Gaines. I think she's a swimmer, and she got she lost her medal, you know what I'm saying, to a dude. You know what I'm saying? A dude all up in the girls' locker room, all kind of stuff. This one here is gonna get real good.
Kentucky, where I was a member of the UK's women's swim and dive team. I proudly finished my career as a 12-time NCAA All-American, a 5-time SEC champion, the SEC record holder in the 200 butterfly, making me one of the fastest Americans of all time, a 2-time Olympic trial qualifier, SEC Scholar Athlete of the Year, and SEC Community Service Leader of the Year. But all of that to say that it's a lifelong journey competing at that level, and it's impossible to put into words the amount of sacrifice and dedication that it takes. On March 17th of 2022, my teammates and I, as well as female swimmers from universities around the country, were forced to compete against biological male Leah Thomas. Thomas was allowed to compete in the women's division after competing as a member of the University of Pennsylvania's men's swim team for 3 years as Will Thomas. We watched on the side of the pool as Thomas swam to a national title in the 500 freestyle, beating out the most impressive and accomplished female swimmers in the country, including many Olympians and American record holders, by body lengths. Previously, Thomas had been ranked 462nd at best in the men's division the year prior. The next day, I raced Thomas in the 200 freestyle, which ended up in a tie. We went the exact same time down to the 100th of a second. Having only one trophy, the NCAA handed it to Thomas and told me I had to go home empty-handed. And when I asked why, which was a question they were not prepared to be asked, I actually appreciate their honesty because they said, Thomas, it was crucial. Thomas had it for picture purposes. Thomas had to have it for the pictures. I felt betrayed. I felt belittled. I felt reduced to a photo op. But my feelings didn't matter. What mattered to the NCAA were the feelings of a biological male. In 1972, Congress enacted Title IX to end unjust sex discrimination in all aspects of education, including college athletics. But by allowing Thomas to displace female athletes in the pool and on the podium, the NCAA intentionally and explicitly discriminated on the basis of sex. Although the NCAA claimed it acted in the name of inclusion, its policies in fact excluded female athletes, which were the very female athletes whom Title IX was passed to protect. But that is not all. In addition to being forced to give up our awards and our titles and our opportunities, the NCAA forced me.
Man, y'all haven't heard nothing yet. This is just the first part that happened 7 days ago. Yesterday, they just got finished with a 10-hour hearing. I'm going to try to break it up as much as possible. I might do some overtime on this one. You know what I'm saying? And I think it's still going. You know, this is a serious hearing right here, bro. Salute, Nene Nicole. Thank you for joining us today. Man, but this is basically, I tried to disguise it a little bit as far as this is the Rainbow Coalition hearing, you know what I'm saying? Them interfering with the sports and stuff like that. They all up in our little girl's bathroom and stuff like that. I wish I would catch a dude coming out of the damn bathroom that my daughter just walked in. I mean, man, shit. I don't know what make them think that they actually gonna get away with this shit in certain parts of town. I mean, they fuck people up for less where I'm from. What the fuck? Way less. It's $2 less, goddamn. Go a motherfucking $2.
Me and my female swimmers to share a locker room with Thomas, a 6'4", 22-year-old male equipped with and exposing male genitalia. Let me be clear about this. We were not forewarned we would be sharing a locker room. No one asked for our consent, and we did not give our consent. And I'll set the scene. A swimming locker room is not a place of modesty. You're undressing, you're fully exposed, and we were forced to take off our swimsuit in front of a man who was doing the exact same thing. If nothing else, I truly hope how you can...
Right there, that's why I disagree with her. So you mean to tell me they forced you to get undressed in front of him? Is that what she just said? Let me take it back 15 seconds here.
Sharing a locker room. No one asked for our consent, and we did not give our consent. And I'll set the scene. A swimming locker room is not a place of modesty. You're undressing, you're fully exposed, and we were forced to take off our swimsuit in front of a man who was doing the exact same thing. If nothing else...
That's exactly what she said. Now, I'm not sure how true that is. I'll rewind it one more time here. I'm not sure how true that is, but damn. I wish. Now you see why that dude was acting out the way he was at the school board meetings and stuff. We're going to get into a couple of those since, you know what I'm saying, it is summertime, the school board meetings and all the bullshit that they've been teaching and shit. You know what I'm saying? That they just allowing in their schools. We're gonna get into all that. You know what I'm saying? I am here for the bullshit, man.
And I'll set the scene. A swimming locker room is not a place of modesty. You're undressing, you're fully exposed, and we were forced to take off our swimsuit in front of a man who was doing the exact same thing. If nothing else,
I wish.
I truly hope how you can see this as a violation of our right to privacy, and how some of us have felt uncomfortable, embarrassed, and even traumatized by this experience.
I want to know, how did they go about doing that, making if it's like she say, forcing them to undress in front of males. Hey, yeah, he undressing in front of them and shit. I mean, how in the hell they got that kind of power over you to force you to undress in front of a man? That's a lawsuit by itself, ain't it? What the fuck?
I know that I don't speak for every single person who competed against Leah Thomas, but I know I speak for many because I saw the tears.
They got me stopping this
I saw the
early.
tears from the 9th and 17th place finishers who missed out on being named an All-American by one place. And I can attest to the extreme discomfort in the locker room from these 18 to 22-year-old girls when you turn around and there's male eyes watching in that same room. And I can attest to the whispers and the grumbles of anger and frustration from these girls who, just like myself, had worked their entire lives to get to this meet. And I can attest to the fact that around the country, these female athletes.
Now, I have to think about it because I'm a wrestler too. I've been in the locker rooms and stuff like that. You know what I'm saying? If you want complete privacy, why didn't you just go to a stall? You know what I'm saying? You could have went to one of the stalls and changed out. You know what I'm saying? I don't think the guy can get turned on by looking at your ankle and feet unless he's some kind of freak or something. And I doubt the other girls will allow him just to stand there and try to peek through the crack of the motherfucker. But, I mean, that would have been my best advice for her. Or I'm pretty sure that the shower is not attached directly to the locker area. You know what I'm saying? You could have had a couple of girls go block off the shower and y'all could have changed up in there. And let him change over by the lockers, you know what I'm saying? But I do understand completely what she's saying. The motherfucker shouldn't be in there, period. I was just thinking about what she was saying, forced to undress in front of him. What kind of bullshit is this?
To oppose the inclusion of Leah Thomas in the women's divisions were threatened, intimidated, and emotionally blackmailed into silence and submission. But unfortunately, our experiences are not unique. The number of female athletes who have been denied opportunities, traumatized, or hurt by policies that claim to promote inclusion is growing at an alarming rate. I hear these female athletes and their parents. I hear from these people who are seriously injured, one with permanent injuries that will plague the rest of her life because she was forced to compete against a much physically stronger man. This is unacceptable and the integrity of women's sports is lost. It's unfair, it's discriminatory, and it must stop. Women's rights to privacy, single-sex spaces, and opportunities are being encroached on. Sports, sororities, locker rooms, dorm rooms, shelters, prisons. Some have tried to tar those of us speaking up for women's safety, security, and opportunities as transphobic or bigoted, and this is untrue. I've heard from people within this community, gay, lesbian, and trans-identifying Americans that agree females should not be asked to step aside and make...
You notice we never went through this when a girl comes into a man's sport? Football, baseball, you know what I'm saying? We have a women championship wrestler, Olympic championship wrestler, you know what I'm saying, from Texas. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't made a big deal. I'm pretty sure she went off, or these girls went off to themselves and changed or whatever they needed to do without all these complicated things that this coalition, this rainbow coalition is doing. You know what I'm saying? I mean, all this lottery, especially after all this lottery I'm seeing being played, and especially in the hood and stuff like this, a lot of that money is supposed to go to the school boards and things like that. And, I mean, they got enough money that they could build an extra locker room. I mean, what else are they doing with the money? It's not going into the states. The communities are still fucked up. It's supposed to go to the schools, and the schools are still fucked up. So who's pocketing all this damn money that niggas be playing every fucking day? Every day they must have a ticket. You get in their car and shit, they got bundles of damn tickets on their damn sun visor and shit falling down, hitting you all up in the head. They can go right in and find their lucky number and all this shit. Where's all this money going? I'm pretty sure everybody's car ain't like that, but I'm pretty sure y'all know a few people.
Room for male-bodied individuals, no matter how they identify. Defending women's rights is not anti-anyone. Believing in biology is not bigoted. And following the science that there are only two sexes and that there are very real and important differences between the two sexes is not hateful, it's fact. I'll end with a quote very briefly from tennis legend Martina Navratilova. There will always be significant numbers of boys and men who would beat the best girls and women in head-to-head competition. Claims to the contrary are simply a denial of science. I thank you guys for listening, and I truly hope you heard my story.
Thank you, Ms. Gaines. Ms. Robinson?
Chairman Durbin, Ranking Member Graham, and members of the committee, my name is Kelly Robinson. I use she, her pronouns. I'm proud to serve as...
Now, this black woman here is the woman that made me want to watch this. I was seeing some of the clips, man. Matter of fact, I was seeing a lot of clips of her. Just couldn't answer no questions whatsoever, man. I don't seen about 8 or 9 clips and shit, because this is like from 7 days ago. So you know they cut pieces, the highlights and shit like that. Man, when you hear this woman here, it's like, is this what this which call was all about? This equity or equality or whatever that act was about 2 years ago? Is that what this is? Giving people jobs that don't belong in the position that they in. They just getting the job because they're black. That's what the fuck she looked like to me. You know what I'm saying? But let's get into it, man. Her name is Kelly Robinson. This is Kelly Robinson. She make us look bad, y'all. I ain't even gonna lie. Gabe, you too.
President of the Human Rights Campaign, our nation's largest civil rights organization working to achieve full equality for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer people across the country. Thank you for inviting me to submit testimony at this important hearing. On behalf of HRC's more than 3 million members and supporters, I've come here today with a single message. The LGBTQ plus people.
Gabe, African Petty told me to say that.
The United States are living in a state of emergency. This is not an exaggeration. This is not a dramatization. More than 525 anti-LGBTQ plus bills have been introduced this year in the States. More than 220 of those bills target the transgender community, many targeting children, transgender children. And more than 75 of those anti-LGBTQ plus bills have now become law. This includes laws that ban books and censor curriculum in the classroom. This includes laws that forbid children from being able to safely use a bathroom at school, and laws that criminalize doctors providing life-saving, gender-affirming health care. The purpose of these laws is to facilitate a rise in political extremism by alienating and isolating LGBTQ plus Americans, and the impact of these laws is truly alarming. There's now more violence against LGBTQ plus Americans than ever before, with mass shootings in our safe space. Healthcare. The purpose of these laws is to facilitate a rise in political extremism by alienating and isolating LGBTQ plus Americans, and the impact of these laws is truly alarming. There's now more violence against LGBTQ plus Americans than ever before, with mass shootings in our safe spaces, murders of transgender people, and threats from the Proud Boys, neo-Nazis, and other groups the Southern Poverty Law Center has designated as extremists. There is now more anxiety and depression among LGBTQ plus children. Data from our most recent survey of LGBTQ plus teens shows that these laws are making young people feel unsafe and can prevent them from seeing a full future for themselves. There are also more
I ain't even gonna call you out your name yet. But they wouldn't feel this way if you didn't put this bullshit in their fucking heads from the fucking jump. Hey, True Sippers, I ain't even gonna lie. I wish y'all could see this woman's braids right now. How in the hell you got them out here in front of Congress, man, with your braids looking this fucked up, man? It looked like she got an evening shade, goddamn, for a razor line. This motherfucker, I ain't even gonna start this shit, goddamn, gonna look. But that's the dumbest thing you could ever say. They feel threatened and stuff because they they wouldn't be in this fucking position if you didn't force this shit down their fucking throats, confusing these kids at 5, 6 years old and shit. I'm just saying. I'm for real. I wish I could. I got to change everything around. It'll be hard to post the link in the chat. But man, you got to see this woman's head, man. Like what the fuck? It looked like a cat was playing in some yarn, man, and was just twirling around. But and dry as shit too. Gosh,
conversations among families about whether the state where they live is safe for their children. A mother of 2 transgender teens who is deciding whether to move from her hometown in Texas told me simply, "We have accepted that this state is not safe. It is like a war zone. In every county you represent, in every county your colleagues represent, you will find parents and children, teachers and nurses, community leaders, and small business owners who are afraid that the rise in legislative assaults and the political extremism has put a target on their backs. Such fear has no place in the United States of America. That's why, for the first time in HRC's nearly half-century history, we have declared this state of emergency.
And it's like, why do they always use our people's face to be the fucking sellout? I mean, I just don't understand. But I'm gonna see what everybody else is really saying and shit. But she is the only one that's coming defending this bull crap. Like, they come in defending that shit like all black folks are supposed to be down with this crap. But I'm a history guy. I don't see that in our culture. I only see it on statues over in Rome and Greece and shit. You don't see that shit on our walls and shit. If it is, they just not showing it. So I can't say completely that it ain't. But I haven't seen none.
Also issued a guidebook to help LGBTQ plus Americans stay safe as they navigate the new anti-LGBTQ plus laws, and a report that details the impact of these laws for advocates, for policymakers, and for the media. I submitted both into the record. Chairman Durbin, Ranking Member Graham, and members of the committee, We need you to help us answer the state of emergency with a sense of urgency. Today, Senators Merkley, Baldwin, and Booker will introduce the Equality Act, which would make protections for LGBTQ+ Americans consistent and explicit across our nation. It's been nearly a decade since this bill was first introduced, and in that time, LGBTQ+ members of the military have served openly. Marriage equality has been codified in federal law, and more LGBTQ+ members of Congress have been elected than ever before. Furthermore, today, more than 8 in 10 Americans support comprehensive non-discrimination laws for LGBTQ+ people. It is time for Congress to catch up with where our country already is and pass the Equality Act. I want to conclude today by saying that although this is a state of emergency, I believe that we still live in a land of infinite possibility, a nation that prides itself on progress. For every Tennessee, there is a Minnesota which has recently passed a state.
I'm about to get real disrespectful here in a goddamn second. I'm trying to show her mercy. But how in the fuck is this situation is a state of emergency coming from your black ass mouth? We've been in a state of fucking emergency for goddamn on the last goddamn 400 fucking years. And you speaking up for some motherfuckers who just now come from out of hiding in the closet? And then sit there and grin? I think it was my man D Sizzle back in the days. It felt real uncomfortable to see Obama talk about gay rights and stuff on the Selma Bridge at that anniversary. It felt real uncomfortable at that moment, and I understand why I felt uncomfortable, but I did not know it was going to lead to this shit. It's like she's putting black folks in like third, fourth place in this country. I mean, if they say white supremacy is running, then that mean the white person is top. We was at least number 2. Now you got the border jumpers coming in, and the LGBT got there gonna taking over. So where we stand in all this? I'm just saying. I might be wrong. If I'm wrong, let me know in the chat. Y'all my peeps. You know what I'm saying? But this, she talking some real dumb shit. Let me go back a couple of seconds here. I think that was like 30 seconds.
Since this bill was first introduced, and in that time, LGBTQ+ members of the military have served openly.
It's my turn. Thank you.
Marriage equality has been codified in federal law, and more LGBTQ+ members of Congress have been elected than ever before. Furthermore, today, more than 8 in 10 Americans support comprehensive non-discrimination laws for LGBTQ+ people. It is time for Congress to catch up with where our country already is and pass the Equality Act. I want to conclude today by saying that although this is a state of emergency,
y'all ain't nothing but down 1%.
I believe that we still live in a land of infinite possibility, a nation that prides itself on progress. For every Tennessee, there is a Minnesota which has recently passed a statewide ban on so-called conversion therapy. For every Florida, there is a Michigan which recently became the 22nd state to make LGBTQ+ non-discrimination protections law. For every Texas, there is a Pennsylvania which is on the cusp of becoming the 23rd state to do so. For every Defense of Marriage Act, there is a Respect for Marriage Act. And for every extremist, there are many, many more Americans who support LGBTQ+ rights. Our nation is greater than all this hate, and we must take action now to end this emergency and secure.
I have no problem with them backing this shit up. But why do they feel that it's more important than everything else that was here before they ass came out the closet? Where the fuck they been for the last 60 fucking years? I mean, they could have spoke up a long fucking time ago. If it was that important to them. Why are they using the strength for us, who did all the work through the civil rights and all that shit, to come up behind and try to steal everything from up under us? These are the questions we might need to be asking. This is the questions I'm asking myself, so I can't tell y'all what to ask, you know what I'm saying? Y'all can ask what y'all want by what y'all hearing, you know what I'm saying? But that's just how I'm looking at it right now. It just... And boy, she got some funny looking glasses. It looked like she is... looking like she looking out a small glass of water. Goddamn, I need to get a little closer. But I ain't gonna tell nobody else.
Secure equality for every American, without exception.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson. Well, I'll start the 5-minute rounds and I'll begin. Lindsey Graham's my friend and my colleague. We see things differently and we still get along, which I think is the nature of good work in Congress, at least I hope it is. I would say to him, it is interesting to me that you cannot put a nominee for the Supreme Court of the United States at that table, and they all sit there, without that person expecting a question as to whether or not they're going to be influenced by foreign laws Will you look at laws in other countries, or are you going to stick with America? And the answer they're waiting for is, I stick with America. And now we have references to Europe as the standard bearer in terms of where America should go for its future. Secondly,
oh, hell no. So now we're supposed to be following Europe? I mean, it seemed like we following Germany a little bit with this anti-fascist shit, you know what I'm saying? I mean, they pumping this shit hard in our face and stuff, man. Our president even put up a damn rainbow flag in between two American flags. I can't believe it. We're taking this too damn far.
If we're called an outlier in that headline, guilty as...
And believe me, I feel the same way about Black Lives Matter and them putting shit on basketball courts and all over shit and stuff like that. You know what I'm saying? A bunch of millionaire motherfuckers running around promoting this shit and ain't did shit for us. You know what I'm saying? They're gonna have a problem with them pushing that. It's even brainwashing. You know what I'm saying? Black Lives Matter made us feel like we was living in two countries. You know what I'm saying? You having two national anthems at sports events and shit like that and shit. That's the reason why I don't watch a lot of sports no more. Yeah, Gabe, they want us to be European. Hey. We're already part of it, speaking English and stuff like that, but we talking about the country, you know what I'm saying? And how they conduct themselves and what they allow, and man, exactly, man.
Charged. America has always been like an outlier. A written constitution for over 200 years, a Bill of Rights that people can depend on. We are outliers. No one in Europe can make the same claim. So I would just start with the premise, I love Europe, I love the Europeans, but we're Americans. And when it comes to the decisions as basic as the rights of our individual citizens and freedoms, I think we've got a pretty good starting point with the Constitution and Bill of Rights. I want to ask you, Dr. Lopez, there have been references made here to whether or not your profession and what you've done with your life for the last 10 years is an outlier itself. That in fact, that you're not doing what is mainstream medicine in America. How do you respond to that?
That is not true. The type of care that I provide, gender-affirming care, is the mainstream standard of care, best practice, recommended by all the legitimate medical societies in the United States and across the world. And as I said in my opening statement, we have a clinical experience of more than 20 years and a robust body of evidence that supports this treatment as life-saving, decreasing depression and anxiety. There are no other studies that support any other treatment. So this is the mainstream treatment. And
accepted by the American Medical Association and the American Academy of Pediatrics as well?
Correct.
Is there any major professional medical organization in the United States of America that opposes this form of care?
No.
That speaks for itself. We're talking about science and medicine versus a political spin on the issue. I wanted to say I'm old enough to remember the debate on the Equal Rights Amendment 50 years ago. The fears, if we pass the Equal Rights Amendment, women will be serving in combat. You know what? Women are serving in combat because they want to serve in combat and we need them. If we pass the Equal Rights Amendment, we're going to have men and women sharing the same bathrooms. Have you been to restaurants with all-gender bathrooms? I've seen them quite frequently in Chicago, and I'm sure you've seen them too. When I listen to Ms. Gaines, I think there's a fundamental call for justice in your statement. I understand it. We've got to be able to work that out as a nation, and not at the expense of Haley Walker and her future. There has to be a middle ground here that is fair to both. As far as I'm concerned, that's our job on this side of the table to deal with that moving forward. Dr. Lopez, you said, and I want to make sure it's on the record clearly, that accepted medical practice in this field does not provide for surgery for the youth. Is that correct?
Their genital surgery is not recommended for minors. That is the standard of care.
And in terms of hormone therapy, it is not administered until after puberty?
That is recommended in adolescence.
And if you went forward with any surgery at any point, or even medications that we're talking, has it been your practice to involve the parents of the young person involved?
That is the standard of care. Parents, all legal guardians of parents have to consent to the treatment. That's part of the medical decision making, is to involve the parents and discuss the risks and benefits like with any type of medical treatment. And at the end of the day, it is the parents that consent to the treatment.
Ms. Robinson, you've noted the resurgence, if you will, of anti-LGBTQ legislation across the country. A lot of it's focused on the transgender issue, but not exclusively when we look at the body of the legislation. What else is coming up in the state legislature that concerns you?
I mean, we're concerned about bathroom bills reemerging, not moving forward, explicit non-discrimination for protections for communities, and so much more. And for me, what's even more concerning is the violent rhetoric that surrounds every introduction of a bill. I mean, it's contributing to the fact that 1 in 5 of every hate crime is now motivated by anti-LGBTQ+ bias. This is an urgent problem facing our community and creating fear and isolation, even when the bills aren't passed into law.
Thank you. Senator Graham?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Robinson, these state laws that you referenced regarding transgender, do you think they're driven by hate, ignorance? What's causing this?
I mean, we know that the people behind these bills are part of a well-funded opposition groups. Organizations like the Alliance to Defend Freedom are a part of that.
Do you think it's driven by hate?
I think it's driven by a well-funded group of opposition.
I didn't ask you where they get the money. I asked you their motivations.
I think it's driven by power. I think that there is a move right now to control people and our bodies for the sake of power. I don't think it's about
just
people.
for power, right?
Excuse
You don't
me?
think these are hateful people that are doing this?
I think that this is about power, but I do think that as the bills are moving forward, they are creating a culture of hate. And I have to say again that every time we see the introduction of these bills, they are accompanied with violent online campaigns that call my community groomers and pedophiles.
Tell you that violent rhetoric has no place in this debate or any other debate. Ms. Gaines, what's the average day like for a young lady trying to compete at the level you've competed at in terms of training?
So I started swimming when I was 4. I graduated college when I was 22, so I dedicated 18 years of my life to my sport, which of course includes your sport-specific training, swimming, but also weightlifting, also your diet, also your sleep schedule, not to mention the social sacrifices you have to make. At the collegiate level, we were swimming in the water every single day for 6 hours, 3 of those hours being before 8 a.m. So you practice from 5 to 8, you go to class, you come back to practice, you swim from 1:30 to 4:30.
I had to clear up the picture a little bit, man. I didn't want to choke that girl's hair by myself and stuff, man. Where did it go back to that black chick, man? That's like, I'm not sure if she got a faded braid, but man, something ain't right. Salute, E. Brooks. Thank you for joining us today.
We ate dinner at 5 o'clock because we were starving. Eat dinner, do your homework, ice your shoulder, go to bed, wake up, you do it all again the next day. We were swimming over 10 miles on average every single day.
Dr. Lopez, do you believe that Leah Thomas had an advantage in swimming because she was a biological male who transitioned sometime late in college?
I am not a sports medicine physician. I can only relate to the stand of the Sports Medicine Federal International Association.
What do they say?
They do not recommend the exclusion of transgender individuals in sports.
Do they believe it's fair for Leah Thomas, who spent 3 years swimming for the men's team, in the senior year of college, to compete in the women's division? They think that's okay?
As a medical professional, I don't have the scientific expertise to provide an opinion.
Let me tell you as a person. You don't need a medical degree. This is not okay. This is definitely not okay. You work all your life training as a swimmer, competing against biological girls, and you wind up your senior in college competing with somebody who 3 years swam as a guy. And you lose. Ms. Robinson, do 80% of Americans support biological males competing?
It's amazing to hear this guy stand up for something right. This guy crooked as hell. Did y'all see the video, man, when they ran him through the airport last year? They straight chased him out the airport, man. That shit was funny.
Competing in women's athletics.
I can say more than 70% of Americans believe that the rash of attacks on trans sports is the wrong political priority.
Question. Do 80% of Americans support biological males participating in female sports?
I mean, I can't verify that, but what I can say
I
is
can tell you it's not even close. That there's nothing wrong with you if you have a problem with Miss Gaines feeling cheated. There's nothing wrong with you if you have a problem with Miss Gaines feeling uncomfortable in a lot.
If anybody is looking for some quick shorts on stupidity, this would be the video, this would be the hearing right here, boy. Because I swear the highlights I seen of this black woman saying the things out of her mouth, it gets funnier and funnier. She can't answer one straight question.
Locker room. There's nothing wrong with you. Now, we'll sort this out as a nation, but this idea that something's wrong with her because she feels cheated is absurd. You have every right to feel that way. And I imagine a lot of young ladies do feel uncomfortable being in a locker room under the situation you described. Mr. Sharp, what's the purpose of your organization, and what's your message to America?
Senator, we want to protect the freedom of all Americans, and that includes our desire to ensure that children and women, that their interests are protected, that they're not harmed by this gender ideology that's being pushed, and that each of us is free to live and work and speak without being coerced or punished by the government because of our good faith beliefs.
One final question, Ms. Gaines. Do you think the experience you had in the dressing room is something that young girls throughout the country share your views?
I get messages every single day from girls of all over the political spectrum. We mentioned this issue of being politicized. This is not politics for me. This is a real life issue, and I want to put it on record. I don't believe trans athletes should be banned from sports. That's the rhetoric that's being pushed from the opposition. Anti-trans bill bans trans athletes. Trans athletes should not be banned from playing sports. Of course not. I just want everyone to compete where it's fair and where it's safe, and I don't understand how that's overly controversial. But yes, especially at that NCAA championships, every single girl, at least on my team, being a team captain, I had these conversations with my team, and there was 40 girls on my team. We all felt the same way. I've had the conversations. We all felt uncomfortable in that locker room.
Thank you.
Senator Coons?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to all of our witnesses today for sharing your stories and your experiences. Let me talk initially to Ms. Walker, if I could. Thank you. As a parent of 3 children myself, I can only imagine how proud your parents must be of your poise and your advocacy. And thank you for sharing with us that you're a straight-A student and participating in school and happy. It is a very difficult thing to insert yourself into these very heated debates in your home state of Alabama and nationally. And I could feel your frustration explaining that as you search for college, you feel you can no longer safely do so in your home state. I just don't think that's right. And I think someday soon we may be in a place where young people can search out their college dreams without having to worry about whether they're in a state that affirms them or not. You mentioned something about this is not an ideology that's been pushed on you. Could you just help us for a moment understand? You described consulting closely with your parents, then with your physician, to make a decision about your future that reflects who you are and how you were created. Can you just help us understand that a little bit further, Ms. Walker?
Yeah, so like I said, whenever I was about 11 years old, I was doing research on the LGBTQ community, and I came across the term transgender. And growing up as a kid, I always knew that I was different, and so I came to my parents with saying that I think I am transgender. And at first, we didn't really know what that meant. We weren't super educated on the issue because, those at that time it wasn't a big public issue. And so whenever we went to our doctors, they were all incredibly supportive, and they never were telling me what I should do. The entire first couple of visits were just listening to me, listening to my story, who I was, and what I thought was best for me and what they could do to help me. It wasn't, you need to start these puberty blockers immediately. It wasn't, you have to do all of this to identify as transgender, because everybody's journey is different. And they just wanted to do what was best for me, and they listened to me to make sure that that was what I wanted to do.
Thank you. Dr. Lopez, one of the things you mentioned was the importance of close consultation with parents in making a decision about gender-affirming care. Could you just briefly speak to the role that parents play in your practice in making any decision about gender-affirming care for their children?
The decision to start gender-affirming care is a highly complex decision. It's not easy for any parent from any background. Most parents are not well informed when this happens to them. And it takes a lot of time and effort to meet with different types of professionals, mental health providers and physicians, to go discuss risks and benefits and potential alternatives, which is what should be done for any type of medical treatment.
And what sort of impact do you see on the mental and physical health of your patients in a state where there is a ban imposed on that sort of care, or on books or on discussions in schools? Does that have any impact whatsoever?
I am very, very worried. That is the reason that I am here. I'm here because I am very worried for the mental health of my patients. The ones that I see in my clinic, which are supported by their parents and receiving gender-affirming care, are thriving. And if that is taken away from them, I am sure their mental health will worsen, not only because the treatment that helps them is taken away, but also because there's a feeling of stigma and discrimination that has been created around it. And as I say, they're debating whether to leave or hide, and it's really devastating.
Mr. Sharp, if I might, in your written testimony, you criticized schools for trying to replace parents as the ultimate determinants of what's best for their children when it comes to things like teaching about LGBTQ rights and issues. But if I understand you correctly from your spoken testimony, you also think parents should be barred from making medical care decisions about their own children in the case of gender-affirming care as described by Dr. Lopez. Which one is it? Are parents in charge of what's in the best interest of their children or not?
Thank you, Senator. We do support the right of parents, but our laws have long recognized that there are limits to those and that parents can't consent to things that can be damaging and harmful. And that's why when the European countries, they're looking at the science. This is about following the science, and they do so. They find that there's not evidence of medical transition producing good outcomes versus the mental health counseling. And that's what we want to prioritize, so that parents can choose among the psychotherapy, counseling, and other options to truly help children dealing with gender dysphoria.
Thank you. Dr. Lopez, if I might, just in conclusion, your testimony was that the American Medical Association and the American Academy of Pediatrics both support gender-affirming care as an option for children and their parents to choose in consultation with physicians. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And how do you reconcile what Mr. Sharp just said about the EU with our national medical associations that are relevant to this care?
First of all, no country in Europe has banned gender-affirming care. They have taken steps to make sure that there is a cautious approach when deciding eligibility for gender-affirming care. And actually, the steps they have taken are very similar to what is the standard of care practices, right?
Man, fuck they steps. What the fuck goddamn Europe got to do with us? Let's let this big dummy keep talking.
Recommended by the Endocrine Society and the WPATH, which does recommend a very careful, comprehensive, lengthy assessment before deciding that this is the best care for the patients. And there is no single research study that shows that psychological therapy, as mentioned by Dr. Sharp, is enough to resolve gender dysphoria and mental health issues that transgender people can have.
Thank you. Thank you all for your testimony today.
Thank you, Senator Coons. Senator Hawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to the witnesses for being here. Ms. Gaines, I want to start with you. Thank you for your courage in being here today. Thank you for your courage and advocacy for women. You have been subjected to an unbelievable amount of abuse. You talk about intimidation, threats of violence. You have suffered it. I want to put up here a picture so everybody can see it. This was the welcome you were treated to at San Francisco State University just a couple of months ago when a mob assembled where you were supposed to speak, I believe for over 3 hours, screamed, threatened you, barricaded you in a room. Do I have that basically correct?
Yes, I was held for ransom for 3.5 hours by hundreds of these protesters, as you see on the board. They demanded that I had to pay them money if I wanted to make it home to see my family safe again. The law enforcement in San Francisco, I respect, and I think law enforcement is what's brave, not me, and I respect all law enforcement, but what the law enforcement I was met with in San Francisco, in my opinion, failed miserably in effectively doing their job. They had mentioned that it was not ideal for them to be seen as anything other than an ally to this community, and that was made very obvious in the treatment and effectiveness of removing me safely from that situation.
Why were you threatened and barricaded into a room and held for ransom for hours on end? I mean, what was it you were saying that was so terrible?
I was invited to speak on my experience of my senior year in competing against a male. Nothing opinionated about what I shared. It was sheerly the exact lived experience of what me and my teammates and fellow competitors dealt with. And so I spoke. After my speech, there was of course a lot of protesters in the room, which I'm totally fine with people protesting. It's their right to protest. But what I'm not fine with is when it does turn violent in the way that it did. Because protesters afterwards, they rushed into the room, they turned off the lights, they rushed to the front. Myself and others were assaulted, and that's ultimately when I was held for hostage for 3.5 hours.
This is unbelievable, unbelievable. Thank you for your courage in the midst of that. Let's talk a little bit about the message that you were sharing, and you started to talk about it in your opening statement. Just tell us about your experience, because nobody can question your experience. I don't think anybody's sitting.
Tell you the truth, E. Brooks, I believe that 70% that black girl was talking about that support LGBT, I actually think support this girl with the blonde hair. Dang, I forgot her name just that quick. Gaines. I think the whole country is behind her in this. I mean, some of these people, it's like they don't have no nieces, no sisters. You know what I'm saying? They're not even trying to protect their mom, which that's who they should be protecting at the age that they're at this moment. That means she's way older. She can't go into a public bathroom without seeing a man. She ain't never grow up with no shit like that. What makes them think that this shit is cool? I just don't understand. Let me get back to this before I start smacking.
Being at the table, and certainly nobody at this podium has had the experience that you have had. You were talking about just the incredible surprise, shall I say, to put it gently, of finding a biological man, a 6'4" biological man in your locker room and having to accept that without being asked about it, without being told about it even. What was that like for you? Tell us about that.
Again, we only became aware we would be undressing next to a man was when we had to see a man undressing while we were simultaneously undressing. And so I immediately left.
E. Brooks, her name is Mrs. Riley Gaines. That is Riley, R-I-L-E-Y, Gaines, G-A-I-N-E-S. Because I know it's cut off on y'all screen or whatever. But her name is Miss Riley Gaines. She is I think a United Olympic swimmer. And she worked hard to get in her position. To get took out by a dude that couldn't make it in man sports is fucked up. That's just period. Besides all this other shit on top of this. Yeah.
The locker room, and I went up to one of the officials on the pool deck and I said, what are the guidelines to allow a man into our locker room? I know the guidelines for the competition, but what are the guidelines for the locker room? And he so nonchalantly said back, oh, we actually got around this by making locker rooms unisex. And so I'm thinking to myself in these brief moments, first and foremost, you just admitted this as a male by acknowledging how you had to change your rules to make the locker rooms unisex. You acknowledge that we do not share the same sex, first and foremost. Secondly, unisex? Any man could have walked into our locker room, any coach, any official, any man who wanted to would have had full reins to, and bare minimum, we weren't forewarned about it. And that's the traumatizing part. Of course, the experience in and out of the locker room.
Ladies, beware of those bathrooms when you're in public. If you see a man and a woman on that sign, beware when you go in there. That's about the best advice at this moment, because it seems like this little 1% of these voices that's doing this bullshit are winning. You know what I'm saying? A lot of this I blame on the women. Themselves. They should have. This shit started 2, 3, 4 years ago. Nobody was saying nothing. I was watching this shit on the news. I was watching them trying to pass that shit in my state. That shit ain't happening. You know what I'm saying? It is like the women are sitting back on a lot of this shit, man. They let a lot of these dudes take over their gender. You know what I'm saying? We see it every day. Matter of fact, we battling with one of those motherfuckers every day. Women are giving these kind of people that power. The dudes, I mean, at a certain point, we want to beat their fucking ass, especially if you disrespect. You know what I'm saying? But every day we see women giving these kind of people power to say whatever they want, do whatever they want. You know what I'm saying? It's like, I wish all the women just make a stand against all this crap. They can be whatever they fucking want, but putting that shit in our face, trying to get up in the bathrooms and all that shit, we don't even feel comfortable with them in our bathroom. So I know damn well, if we know they're that way, you know what I'm saying? I just don't understand. Let's get back. Sounds like Cal Berkeley University. Probably is. And I'm pretty sure anything in California is probably this way, period. You know what I'm saying? They more like the front runners to a lot of this LGBT and stuff like that. Since they didn't want to claim the Americans that was in the country, in that state, trying to stand up for the state and the country and shit, they wanted to accept this and think it's cool just to accept this, and the administration that's backing this and pushing this. You know what I'm saying? They just turned out the whole fucking country for the next 5 or 6 generations. And they don't seem to care. So, craziness. Let's get back to the show.
From itself is traumatizing, but I think for me, it was so easy for them to dismiss our rights to privacy. Senator Durbin, in your opening statement, you had mentioned this rhetoric. It's, you had mentioned that, what message does it send to trans individuals? And my combat to that is, what message does this send to women, to young girls who are denied of these opportunities? So easily their rights to privacy and safety thrown out of the window to protect a small population, protect one group as long as they're happy. What about us? That is the overall general consensus of how we all felt in that locker room.
Why do you think it is that the NCAA and so many people in power seem intent on just erasing your opinion, your views, the whole category of women? I noticed that recently you just posted this to social media about a message that Harvard was sending around, I think, to its swimmers, telling them, don't talk about Leah Thomas, don't share your opinions. If you get contacted by a member of the media, then refer that to the university. Don't say anything, for heaven's sake. Tell us about this. I mean, this has been your experience over and over and over.
What kind of fucking country is this? Now you can't goddamn have your opinion when somebody asks you a question. They sending out letters and shit. But this is the shit that we wanted to back. You ain't black if you voted for that motherfucker who's helped pushing all this bullshit. So it don't matter if you voted for him or not. If you sit here and back any of their fucking shit, goddamn, going you supporting this shit. I mean, I'm just saying. They did that to us when we just had morals and shit and saying moral things and shit. All of a sudden, we DT supporters just because we have morals and looking at the thing with the open picture. Goddamn, so goddamn, if they stand for any of these people in this administration, goddamn, you backing all this fucking shit too. The pendulum swings both ways.
You're told as a woman to shut up, don't say anything. What's that like?
That is continually happening. And if we do speak up, you're immediately labeled as some name. They will call you everything under the sun, whether it's transphobic, homophobic, racist, white supremacist, domestic terrorist. They will throw them all at you in hopes to deter you, in hopes to silence you. Leah Thomas's teammates, they were forced every single week to go to mandatory LGBTQ education meetings to learn about how just by being cisgender, they were oppressing Leah Thomas. They were told that they're not allowed to take a stance because their school has already taken their stance for them. They were told that you will never get a job, you will never get into grad school, you will lose your friends, you will lose your scholarship and playing time if you speak out. They told these girls that if you do speak out, and any harm whatsoever comes towards Thomas's way, whether that's through social media, whether that's physical, mental, emotional harm, then you are solely responsible and you could be responsible for a potential death. And you don't want that, do you? Of course not. Who would ever want to be responsible in a potential death? But that is the emotional blackmail that is plaguing us not. Solely responsible and you could be responsible for a potential death. And you don't want do speak out. And any harm whatsoever comes towards Thomas's way, whether that's through social media, whether that's physical, mental, emotional harm, then you are solely responsible and you could be responsible for a potential death. And you don't want that, do you? Of course not. Who would ever want to be responsible in a potential death?
So if you speak against this he/she swimmer, are those proper pronouns of what he is? A he/she? What's called? You can be promoting his death. So what the fuck is all these goddamn Karens doing? Should we be able to use the same ideology against all these fucking Karens out here doing that bullshit, calling the cops unnecessarily and shit, the situations and shit, lying and shit? College used to be a great thing to us back in the days and shit, man. Everybody wanted to dream to go to college. Personally, I didn't go to college, you know what I'm saying? I wasn't college material at that point in my life, you know what I'm saying? But they don't turn this place upside down, or it's always been upside down, and all of a sudden now the doors are open. Yeah. But yeah, I'm behind rally games all the way.
But that is the emotional blackmail that is plaguing this country, especially in universities.
Last question, and I'll ask this and then give you a chance to respond, and I'm done with this, Mr. Chairman. Let me give you a chance to respond to something that Leah Thomas said recently, publicly. She said this publicly. They're using, this quote now, they're using the guise of feminism, they meaning you, using the guise of feminism to sort of push transphobic beliefs, meaning you advocating for women's rights is actually just a cover for transphobia. Do you want to respond to that?
Feminism is not a fluid term. The original and the meaning of what it means to be a feminist is to uphold, respect, honor, embrace, and celebrate women on our own physical ceilings, our own uniqueness. That term has not changed. And what this really is a male mansplaining what it is to be a feminist, which I honestly think is pretty ironic, and it's something we've seen before.
Thank you, Senator Hawley. Since reference was made to my earlier statement, I would just like to add something for the record. There is no evidence that transgender athletes are an issue in certain levels of sports. No transgender female athlete has ever won an Olympic medal in women's sports, though the International Olympic Committee has allowed transgender athletes to compete since 2004. 2004. One non-binary athlete who was assigned female at birth won a medal in women's soccer in 2021. Next is Senator Klobuchar.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I want to turn to you, Ms. Robinson, and talk about something that I think it's important, given my background as a prosecutor, that we don't forget, and that is the attacks that we've seen, the unprecedented number of attacks on LGBTQ Americans. We know that LGBTQ Americans continue to face violent attacks, and there's hateful rhetoric dehumanizing them, and
maybe they getting attacked because they in everybody's fucking face trying to push sexual shit. I haven't seen these motherfuckers do nothing else but try to push sexual shit out. Motherfuckers ain't trying to hear that. So yeah, they putting themselves in their position of getting their ass whooped. Why can't they take accountability? Everybody don't want to hear that shit. Everybody don't want to see that shit. Nobody want to see old men walking around talking about what they want to do to other men. Yeah, I had to throw that weak fuck up in there too, goddamn it. Yeah, there you go. But I'm just saying that's the reason why they probably the most attacked and shit.
that is one of the contributing factors. This year, the FBI found that crimes motivated by bias against LGBTQ people represented 20% of all reported hate crimes. This is close to my heart because when I was a prosecutor, I'd never even been in, I remember the White House. President Clinton was president and he introduced the hate crimes bill, and I got to meet the family of Matthew.
Gabe, I need you right now, man. Give me a boo-hoo. What the fuck her story got to do with what this woman is, this Olympic woman is going through and the other people? Your ass is old, you past your prime, and nobody gives a damn. You sitting in a high seat already. These motherfuckers be tripping, man.
Shepard, they were there along with the police who investigated the case. And I think that was a moment for America that kind of flipped how people thought about things and realized that he was just pursuing his own life and ended up, as the investigators described it, looking like a scarecrow, someone thought, pinned to a fence. Could you talk about what trends you are seeing in LGBTQ hate crimes? And why don't you answer that first?
Yeah, the reality is scary. I mean, we're sitting here 7 years since the Pulse nightclub shooting where 49 lives were stolen, and just over 7 months since the shooting at Club Q that stole 5 lives from the community. This uptick of violence is real, and you've said it already. 1 in 5 of every hate crime is motivated.
Dang, y'all still can't see her hair, I don't think. But man, woo. Good googly moogly. I don't know if she got a fade or what. Is that a weave? Or some weave dreads? Them things is thick, boy. She is ghetto.
By anti-LGBTQ plus bias. The other reality that we know is true is that these bad bills targeting the community are often accompanied by campaigns of misinformation and lies that sow fear and transphobia in communities. The very fact that we can't identify Leah Thomas as a transgender woman is playing into the fear and anxiety.
When they say people are preaching misinformation, usually the person who says that and bring it out is usually the person that's doing it, from what I've seen. Anything that they point, any person that's sitting there pointing the finger is usually them doing it, unless you know that you have actual facts yourself, you know what I'm saying, to know that that person is telling the truth. Right here, anything about what she's talking about, I don't see it. If all these people are getting attacked, where is it at on the news? I mean, they running the administration right now. I mean, this shit should be all over the news. If it was us getting attacked by a cop, it'd be all over the fucking news. Why ain't these transgender shits all over the freaking news? I'm just asking. Or they out here doing the government's bid and the government don't give a shit about them. They out here looking like dumbasses. Just like most of our people be doing this shit when it comes to this shit. They'll jump off the ledge for goddamn this shit and be lying the whole way down to the ground.
Society that's motivating these hate crimes. I talk to people every day. I talk to pediatricians that are being escorted to their cars by armed guards because of the bomb threats that they're receiving. I talk to drag queens who are being confronted by Proud Boys with AR-15s outside of drag queen story hours. This epidemic is real and requires action, both legislative and also cultural, in stopping this.
If the Proud Boys are so fucking dangerous and they have AKs, how come we don't have no video feed of them burning up towns and tearing up the fucking streets in protest? I seen a black dude in California get knocked out by the people that she's representing, and I seen the Proud Boys pick this black guy up, take him to the hospital, and actually pay for his hospital bill to get his teeth fixed. That's in the San Francisco newspaper, by the way, if folks were. It was sometime last year. But every time you hear about these P-boys and shit, they always talking this dumb shit and brainwashing the weak-minded. That's what we're fighting against, the weak-minded folks who keep believing and feeding into this bullshit.
This ability for people to just spout lies about our community. Thank you. You mentioned Minnesota in your opening remarks, and I think what we've seen over the last few decades, we have seen progress in the fight for equality, the bipartisan group that worked on the Respect for Marriage Act, led by Senator Baldwin, and we so appreciated her work and how she worked with people on both sides of the aisle to get that done. But half of LGBTQ adults still report experiencing workplace discrimination based on their identity. Could you talk about the Equality Act, why it's important? And specifically, are there still places in the U.S. where an LGBTQ person can be denied a home simply because of who they are? Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. Right now, there are only 23 states that have explicit non-discrimination protections on the books for the LGBTQ plus community. What that means is I could go into a restaurant in Texas and be denied service because I'm married to a woman. It means that some members of the community can experience discrimination in housing and getting access to federally funded colleges and programs. This is really a crisis. We need to make
in the U.S. where an LGBTQ person can be denied a home simply because of who they are. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. Right now, there are only 23 states that have explicit non-discrimination protections on the books for the LGBTQ plus community. What that means is I could go into a restaurant in Texas and be denied service because I'm married to.
Oh, my bad. I didn't know if y'all in here, y'all couldn't hear me and shit. Well, I snapped on this motherfucker. I'm not sure if y'all heard what she said and stuff about being discriminated and stuff. Like if you go to Texas to a restaurant and she shows up with her girlfriend, you know what I'm saying? She won't get no service. Now we have people from Texas and stuff on the team and stuff. I want to know, is this true? Matter of fact, we should go over to the Mo 3 sector and ask all them Texas folks, is this true? If you walk up in a restaurant with another female that you ain't not going to get waited on. The shit that they do, and then they use the blackface to damn sit here and lie about this shit. She looked like a goddamn funny looking fish. I'm sorry.
A woman. It means that some members of the community can experience discrimination in housing and getting access to federally funded men. It means is 3 states that have explicit non-discrimination protections on the books for the LGBTQ plus community. What that means is I could go into a restaurant in Texas and be denied service because I'm married to a woman. It means that some members of the community can experience discrimination in housing and getting access to federally funded colleges and programs. This is really a crisis. We need to make clear that in this country, there's not a patchwork of protections based on your identity. Every American deserves equal access to civil rights and non-discrimination protections. The Equality Act will move forward that into law.
Mm-hmm. And I know there's major companies supporting the bill, that there's been a lot of support for it. One other question along those lines, are there still places in the U.S.?
There you go right there. All of them are following this damn Equality Act. If y'all really knew what that was when he was down running for office, man, would you have voted for this shit? And all the other bullshit that goes along with this Equality Act? Damn.
Where an LGBTQ person can be denied a loan even because of who they are?
Yes, there are.
Okay, very good. Could you talk about some of the progress? You mentioned Minnesota, but some of the progress that have been made in states on a state-by-state basis, which I think shows how, in fact, there are a whole lot of people out there who support the work of HRC and bills and state versions of bills like the Equality Act. I know that my state, as you mentioned, has been a leader. We were a leader on anti-discrimination from the very beginning. In 1993, we began protecting LGBTQ people against workplace discrimination. We were the first state in the nation to outlaw discrimination based on gender identity. So could you talk about progress?
Absolutely. There has been incredible progress for our community. You know, if I look back 20 or 25 years, 60% of Americans oppose same-sex marriage, and now nearly 80% support same-sex marriage, and the Respect for Marriage Act is the law of the land. That changed because we were able to serve openly in the military. That changed because we were able to tell the stories of our lives and show what our love looked like. That changed because now the majority of Americans know someone who is lesbian, gay, or bi. We need to...
They love look like a bunch of drag queens dancing in front of kids. That's what their love look like. Just straight up. That's all you see. Trans trying to get kids in the daggone clubs and shit to see these daggone drag queens and all kind of stuff, man. That's what they love look like. I'm sorry, that's what they show us.
To make sure in this fight that we're not letting people's lack of visibility seed into fear, and instead tell the stories about trans women, tell the stories about trans men, show the stories like Harley's that show that at the end of the day, these are simply Americans who are trying to live. That's what we're fighting for.
Okay, well, and thank you to all the witnesses.
They can tell their story every goddamn day. Do that mean I want to fucking listen to it? I mean, I could tell my story. Do that mean the next person actually want to hear it? Those who want to hear it will hear it. But you trying to force your story to everybody else and shit? Nobody want to hear that shit. I don't care. Keep that shit away from my kids. Right.
So I wish I could ask you all questions, but my colleagues are waiting. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Klobuchar. Senator Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to each of you for taking your time to be here today. We certainly appreciate that. And Riley, I want to come to you. Riley is a Tennessean, and we are so incredibly proud of her work and the job that she is doing. And one thing that I have noticed repeatedly over the last few years is this administration's intent that they continue to push forward, erasing the word woman, their intent when it comes to ending Title IX.
Ms. Blackburn about
and
to get in there.
ending the ability for young girls. You know, in Tennessee, I talk a lot about the Lady Vols, a great basketball team with such great history, and that how important it has been to young girls. When I talk to girls that have played on that team, they talk about the impact that being able to be a Lady Vol and what that had on their life, what that impact was to them personally and professionally. And they talk about the opportunities that were open to them because they were a Lady Vol, they were a competitor. And I say all the time, there are hundreds of young girls that are out there at their home beating that basketball against the backboard and the blacktop and trying to hone their craft so they can be a competitor, they can be an athlete. And I was so disappointed that this administration, the Department of Education, went so far as to propose a rule allowing biological males to compete in women's sports. And Riley, you've referenced the impact of on young girls that this has and how it is kind of defeating, not only to when you are competing, but when you're preparing. And you reference the amount of work that you do, that 5 a.m. swimming, that 5 o'clock dinner, and the way you're double tracking to be a competitor and also get an education. So I want you to talk a little bit about the impact that keeping Title IX and what Title IX meant to you is you were that young girl training, hoping to get a college scholarship, hoping that you would be an NCAA college athlete. Talk about that.
Absolutely. It's far bigger than athletic achievement, and I think that's something that gets lost, especially when we only have a few minutes to share testimony. I shared how I didn't get the trophy, but let me reiterate, it's not about the trophy. I didn't care about holding the tangible object of the probably $5 production trophy. It's about the opportunity. It's about the lifelong skills and characteristics you develop from playing sports. Playing sports, aside from my faith, I put a lot of this in my faith, but playing sports has given me the leadership to do this, the security to take the arrows, to be held hostage. It's playing sports that has given me that confidence, and no girl should lose out on that. It is far bigger than athletic success or chances for opportunity. It is about those transferable skills. There was an Ernst & Young study that came out that said 94% of female C-level executives, so CEO, COO, CFO, 94% of those females were female athletes, and I think that is a entirely true testament of what it means to be an athlete and those skills that it provides you. And I want to mention really briefly, the rewrite of Title IX is an abomination. It is equating sex to gender identity, which means men would live in dorm rooms with women, men would have full access to bathrooms, changing areas, locker rooms. Men could join sororities, which we're seeing happening. It's happening at University of Wyoming. Men could take academic and athletic scholarships away from women. In this new rewrite, it's actually sexual harassment. If you misgender a trans-identified individual, it's sexual harassment. That if you're in a dorm room and you're a woman and you feel uncomfortable sharing this dorm room, if you complain and ask to be moved, you're guilty of sexual harassment.
And you mentioned the transferable skills. I think that is so vital. Give me like the top 3 skills that you developed by learning to be a competitive athlete.
I think especially being 2-year team captain at University of Kentucky, I would say the top 3 skills I learned were teamwork, communication, and leadership, without a doubt. And those are skills that translate to your career. I graduated with every intent on being in dental school. Actually, what I wanted to do was endodontics. I scored in the top percentile of the DAT, which is the dental admissions test. And that's what I thought my life direction was going. And those 3 skills I mentioned, teamwork, leadership, and communication, would have been crucial to becoming a dentist. And now I realize in my advocacy work, they're just as crucial in this field as well.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Booker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, both of you and the ranking member, for holding this committee. And thanks to all 5 of the witnesses here. It takes a lot to be here, especially 2 of our younger witnesses. I was terrified in speaking in front of crowds when I was both of your ages, and it just is extraordinary to me, the raw truth and testimony that you shared with folks here. Ms. Robinson, I just want to start with you because I still live in this little bit of a bizarro world where I have arguments with friends. I'm not talking about political friends. I'm talking about folks.
This is about to get funny. I see it coming. I see it coming. Where D Sizzle at? This is his homeboy.
Folks from my community who think I'm wrong when I say in most states in America, a gay American could post their pictures of their wedding online and then the next day be fired from their job. I mean, literally, most Americans think that this has already been accomplished somehow, that you, just by being gay, you can be discriminated against at your workplace, you can be discriminated against in public accommodations, you can be discriminated against in getting access to financial means that most Americans take for granted. You can be discriminated against even serving on a jury. Could you speak to that for a moment? And just like, I know we're talking about a lot of issues here, but that to me seems outrageous.
Absolutely. This is very real and why we need the Equality Act. What the Equality Act would do is make explicit non-discrimination.
This son of a bitch just say, if you gay, get married, and post your pictures online that you could be fired from your job in some states. Is that what that fool just said? I just have to go back. What? This dude is a clown.
It just is extraordinary to me, the raw truth and testimony that you shared with folks here. Ms. Robinson, I just want to start with you because I still live in this little bit of a bizarro world where I have arguments with friends. I'm not talking about political friends. I'm talking about folks from my community who think I'm wrong when I say in most states in America, a gay American could post their pictures of their wedding on.
So most of his friends, we're going to start off right there. Most of his friends think he's wrong. Period. Before the conversation even started. And he's still going to get in front of Congress and spill this damn lie. This is what we deal with all the time. I debate folks and stuff a lot. This is the kind of stuff that you deal with all the time. He can still be fake and they'll still spill that shit in the middle of a goddamn conversation. You have no proof of that. Why couldn't you go to the proof? You know what I'm saying? Your friends telling you that it don't exist. That means you should be able to pull out paperwork showing this. You should have a witness in this motherfucker. I can't stand black folks to keep lying to my people and got them confused, man. That's the biggest issue. Yes, serious. That's I'm on one today, goddamn.
Online, and then the next day be fired from their job. I mean, literally, most Americans think that this has already been accomplished. An American could post their pictures of their wedding online, and then the next day be fired from their job. I mean, literally, most Americans think that this has already been accomplished somehow, that you, just by being gay, you can be discriminated against at your workplace, you can be discriminated against in public accommodations, you can be discriminated against in getting access to financial means that most Americans take for granted. You can be discriminated against even serving on a...
Now, where's all this been at? We don't been to school with gay motherfuckers. We don't been at work with gay motherfuckers. You be out in public, and this is going back decades. It was never an issue. The dudes and shit, we just say he a little soft or whatever and shit, but if the motherfucker was cool, he was just cool. Even though we know he might be a little bit soft or sideways just by how he move and talk and act. You know what I'm saying? We didn't pay that shit no mind. Why all of a sudden now that they making this an issue? I don't understand. I just don't understand.
A jury. Could you speak to that for a moment? And just like, I know we're talking about a lot of issues here, but that to me seems outrageous.
Absolutely. This is very real and why we need the Equality Act. What the Equality Act would do is make explicit non-discrimination protections across race, gender, sex, and sexual orientation. That's currently not something that exists. You know, one of the reasons that we did the state of emergency is to lift up this.
So they trying to protect LGBT instead of protecting the LD and the elders and the youth in some of these black areas. That most of these motherfuckers are running. Or have some kind of I don't understand this shit. This shit crazy.
This crisis and make it clear, especially as Americans are thinking about where they're going to go to school or taking new jobs across the country. We had to make it clear that there is a dizzying patchwork of protections for LGBTQ plus people across this country. In service of that, we issued a guidebook that includes know your rights resources, where you can go to file complaints, and then also tools to navigate some of these more hostile states.
And if I can just interrupt you, because I had the privilege of serving with John Lewis, and I'm happy with Senator Merkley and Senator Baldwin to lead on this bill in the Senate, but on the House side, John Lewis was leading on this bill. And when you asked him, here's this, Christian, Southern, black elder man, and he would say that these issues are so similar to what he was dealing with. The same things people said about why they didn't want black people in their restaurant, why they didn't want black people to marry white people, why they didn't feel comfortable. On this bill. And when you asked him, here's this, Christian, Southern, black elder man, and he would say that these issues are so similar to what he was dealing with. The same things people said about why they didn't want black people in their restaurant, why they didn't want black people to marry white people, why they didn't feel comfortable with their private business. Why do I have to hire black people? People use religious excuses, cultural excuses. This is my own beliefs that it's wrong. The Bible says it's wrong. It is amazing to me that growing up with two black parents talking about the struggles of the time, who did get denied jobs and promotions, who did see violence and threats, who told stories about white people and black people that were attacked for standing up for equal rights for African Americans. Am I wrong to draw this basic parallel of human dignity, whether it's gender discrimination, discrimination against LGBTQ Americans, black Americans, Muslim Americans? Is there a line that goes through about the basic right to be an American and have equal rights?
Absolutely. This is fundamentally a civil rights issue. The Equality Act has to be signed into law to give us all equal access to that American dream. And I think the other through line here is that
it is right there. They're trying to steal another mission that black folks did and use it for their own, which in some ways I don't have no problem with it, but to overlook the people. Matter of fact, maybe they should, because what have civil rights really done for us? If they feel that they want to hijack it and use it, let's see what they can do with it. If they do more with it, then that means on purpose they held us back, in my opinion. If civil rights and all that stuff worked for the LGBT and all that stuff and didn't work for us in the last 50, 60 years, then that means it was intentionally done, that we're not supposed to prosper. So they might can go ahead. I like to see this shit.
Oftentimes, we've been able to find ourselves on the right side of these social issues. You know, for example, the same things that they're saying about trans people today, they were saying about lesbian gay people 20 years ago, and now the Respect for Marriage Act is the law of the land. The same horrific things they're saying about trans people today, they were saying it about people that lived with HIV and AIDS 30 years ago, and now we've significantly reduced stigma, and we're on our way to ending that epidemic in this generation, in our lifetimes. We can make change on this, but it starts by opening our hearts and minds and acknowledging that in the story of America, so many of us have faced discrimination. When we've come together, when we fought and understood that an attack on one of us is an attack on all of us, we've been able to change the course of history.
I was very moved by your testimony, Ms. Gaines, especially because I don't think most Americans understand what it is to be an elite athlete. I'm here because I was a Division I player. Fundamentally, 50, 60-hour work weeks on my athletic skills. The first year I stepped out, you might have had this experience yourself. I felt like, oh my God, this is how civilians sort of live when you have just so much time. You're not getting up and doing practices. The experiences you had, and the picture that my colleague, Senator Hawley, showed is just outrageous, deplorable, and unacceptable.
Ain't this guy the Democratic House Leader? This dude here is corny as hell. And he got a jelly bean head.
For you talking to your truth. Ms. Walker, what stuns me about what we're seeing right now is a lot of Americans don't understand how widespread the bullying and the
I understand some of my opinions might look biased, but show me something that one of these Democrats said that made sense. They don't talk sense, and it just seems like all their tactics is brainwashing. They tricked everybody, and then they get in here with a bunch of brainwashing. I don't understand how these people get ahead. This dude must have some good money. He must have some real
threats and the violence are not just to those of us who are in elite competition, who often face dealing with these issues as the NCAA is dealing with them, but the widespread nature. I think, Ms. Robinson, in your longer testimony, you were talking about the unbelievable, something's happened in the last decade, of this rise of threats and bullying and violence and murder of LGBTQ Americans at levels that are frightening to me. And Ms. Walker, I want to just end with you because I don't think most Americans understand what it's like to try to just live your truth for the average American that is LGBTQ or trans. Could you just tell one more time as you've listened to the testimony today?
Is he a straight man or a gay man? How you know what it feels like to have your story being told? Hold on. For you to say that means you have to be one yourself. But I could be wrong. But that's how it sounds coming out of his mouth.
The unbelievable, something's happened in the last decade of this rise of threats and bullying and violence and murder of LGBTQ Americans at levels that are frightening to me. And Ms. Walker, I want to just end with you because I don't think most Americans understand what it's like to try to just live your truth for the average American that is LGBTQ or trans. Could you just tell one more time, as you've listened to the testimony today, just how it feels just to be a teenager living your life as you do?
Yeah, it definitely is a struggle day to day. Growing up in a conservative state where there is a lot of misinformation spread about what trans people are, what we do, and how we're just like everybody else, it's definitely been hard for me. Like I said in my testimony.
Look how they looking at her, man. The dudes behind her and the dude beside her, man. It's like they infatuated by another dude. But I ain't gonna say no more. Because I think this is the dude, right? All the heavy makeup, you know what I'm saying? It's caked up a little bit there. There you go.
I was severely bullied in middle school to the point where I had to drop out of public school because there was so much hate every day in the hallways, being misgendered, being dead named, and it got to physical violence at a certain point. And so I had to drop out of public school for that year, and the school wasn't doing anything about it.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for the latitude. And again, if this is about protecting our children, the stories of Ms. Walker and other trans children, it just needs to be heard about what you're enduring. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Booker. Senator Cruz?
It sounds like they trying to help Mr. Booker come out of the closet himself. I mean, from what he was saying, well, how would he know how it feels for his story to be told unless you're representing that kind of person yourself? Deep down inside, let it on out, Booker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Title IX was a landmark civil rights law. It helped create the incredible breadth of women's sports and girls' sports that we see across the country. I believe in girls' sports. I believe in women's sports. I'm the proud father of 2 daughters who are both athletes. I think participating in competitive sports is a wonderful thing for a young girl. I think it is a wonderful thing for a woman. And I think, unfortunately, today's Democrat Party has decided that women's sports and girls' sports no longer matter. And they're willing to push radical legislation designed to destroy girls' sports and women's sports. Ms. Gaines, I want to thank you for your courage. You are relatively young, but you have demonstrated incredible courage. And because you have dared to speak up, you have been demonized, you have been vilified. I saw when you were attacked by a leftist mob at San Francisco State University.
I agree, Brooks. He's one of those ones you don't know how to trust him. He's on both sides of the fence. He's a good chameleon, though.
For daring to speak up. You had an incredible record as a swimmer at the University of Kentucky. You were a 2-time NCAA All-American. You were a 5-time SEC champion. You're an SEC record holder and a 2-time Olympic trial qualifier. But yet on March 27th, 2022, something changed. What happened on March 17th, 2022?
That's when Thomas and I raced in the 200 freestyle and again resulted in a tie.
And so you tied. What was the consequence of tying?
We went behind the awards podium where typically you're handed your trophy, you're marched out, you're named an All-American. And so we go back there and the official looks at both Thomas and myself and says, "Great job, but you guys tied. And we only have 1 trophy, therefore we're giving this trophy to Leah." And I question this and I say, why? And at first I shortened it in my testimony, but really he stumbled on his words. He didn't know how to answer this. And at first he's, well, we're just doing this in chronological order. To which I further pressed and I said, okay, well, what are you being chronological about? Because we tied. And if we're doing this off alphabetical order, G comes before T, so what are you being chronological about?
Yeah, he'd be under scrutiny for a lot of things, but mainly the biggest thing that I remember is when they tried to make a big deal that he took his family to Mexico right at the start of the pandemic. You know what I'm saying? Before the lockdowns and shit, he took his family and kids on a little small vacation. Or was it they were supposed to be voting on something and he had went to the something to do with Texas though. So it was one of those Texas hearings that they were trying to vote on, I think about a year ago, and he had made a trip or something, and they tried to make a big deal. But he's always under scrutiny about something.
To which this wasn't a script they had prepared for him. And he actually appreciated his honesty. He did say, we have to give the trophy for Leah because Leah has to have it for pictures. They've made that clear. Leah has to have the trophy for pictures. You can pose with this trophy, but you have to give yours back. You have to go home empty-handed. Leah Thomas takes the trophy home. End of story.
Now let me ask you, as someone who's competed at the elite level, in your experience, is there a difference between women and men?
Of course. I think we learned this at a very young age, watching even 12 and unders play. Going through puberty causes irreversible advantage that no matter the training, no matter the diet, no matter any alterable change you can make will overcome that male advantage. Especially in sports like swimming where lung capacity matters so much. Even something as silly as throat size, men have on average a 40% larger throat, which sounds like it's nothing, but when you're grasping for air, that 40% larger throat makes a huge difference in athletic success, not to mention height. You guys know the differences.
Ms. Robinson, do you agree with Ms. Gaines that there's a difference between women and men?
If the question is about trans women,
I'm just asking, is there a difference between women and men?
I mean, what I can say is that the
Here we go.
NCAA has rules in place. They've had rules in place for the last decade, and when this competition
Okay, I'm going to try
the
again.
rules were clear.
Do you believe there's a difference
Answer
between
the
women and men? It's a yes/no question. Do you believe there's a difference?
Oh, I think that we're talking about this case with the NCAA.
No, I'm asking a question. Do you believe there's a difference between women and men? Most people could answer this very simply. I'm curious if you're willing to do so.
Oh, absolutely. I'm just putting it into the context of the
that a yes?
conversation that we're having. I think that there are definitions related to sex.
Is
but
that
I
a
also
yes?
think
So I'm
that
trying
when
to get a
we're-
yes or no. I'm not.
Who is her parents? Do they realize she became stupid? I'm not sure how you got through school through our eras thinking like this or saying these kind of stupid things. I don't think you would have graduated. So this is something that you even picked up in college, and I think she might be a little bit of military from some of the words that she used earlier. Did you learn that stuff there? Because I know you didn't learn this stuff growing up. You too old for this bullshit and the shit that she's about to say out of her mouth. She can't even answer a question. How the fuck? You can't be this lucky to pick stupid motherfuckers to talk all goddamn.
I'm not trying to get a speech.
Oh,
Is there a difference between women and men?
I think that there are definitions for biological sex.
Okay, so you're
which
not
is
answering
different
that.
than
Let me ask
gender.
you this question then. Why do women's sports exist? If you can't define
The first black Supreme Court judge woman, she did the same thing when she was supposed to be going in and shit. It's like they can't answer nothing. But these are supposed to be all these powerful black women that has the black girl magic and stuff. They should be able to answer all this shit with everything, with no problems whatsoever. Use your black girl magic to answer these motherfucking questions. Stop beating around the goddamn bush.
a difference between women and men, why not abolish women's sports and just tell little girls to swim with little boys and see who wins?
Oh, I'm simply saying that that sex is
My
different
question,
than gender.
why
and I do believe
why
that
do
women's sports have a great
exist?
value. I mean, Senator, I'll tell you right
Ms.
now.
Robinson, please answer the question I'm asking you.
Absolutely.
Why do women's sports exist?
I think that there are so many positive benefits to sports.
But
I mean,
why have a
we talked
separate
about it here
category for
today.
women? If there's
This goes to show you, all those smart answers that you're hearing from a lot of people ain't always right. They always pay attention when they beat around the bush. If you ask a direct question, it shouldn't be no long explanation for it. Yes or no. Is there a difference, or it ain't? A 2-year-old can answer that question, yes or no. What the fuck?
there's no difference between women and men, why to have women's sports?
I'm saying that there's a difference between sex and gender, and that the NCAA has rules in place, which they have for the last
Mr.
decade.
Chairman,
which
I would
determine
like
that
to enter into the
related
record an
participation.
article from Duke Law called Comparing Athletic Performances for the Best Elite Women to Boys and Men. And it goes through examining in 2017 the top records for women in the world in various track and field events. So, for example, in the 100 meter, the top record for women in the world was 10.71 seconds. Now, that record for the number one woman in the world in 2017 was, in the year 2017, broken by 124 boys under 18. In that same year, the record for the number one competing woman in the 100 meter dash in the world was broken by a total of 2,474 men. If the radical Democrat agenda to destroy girls' sports and women's sports succeeds, little girls will not have a chance to compete. So I ask unanimous consent that this article be entered into the record.
Without objection. Senator Padilla?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
My bad. Lost my damn cursor on the screen. But now that's how you put in some facts. You know what I'm saying? You put in the facts. You ain't have to beat around the bush. It's right there in black and white. You ain't have to go through these long definitions and paragraphs just to get your fucking answer or your point across. Boy, she making us look bad. Boy, it's like 5 people that don't ask her a question that she can't even answer. But talking a whole bunch of smart shit is supposed to make you look good. Even though the smart shit don't have no factual backing. You know what I'm saying? This shit is amazing.
Chair. Colleagues, a recent Trevor Project poll found that 56% of LGBTQ plus youth respondents could not access the mental health services that they need. And this committee and others have discussed the state of mental health in America. It was in a crisis before the pandemic. It's been exacerbated by the pandemic, and most acutely within the LGBTQ plus community, and most acutely amongst its youth. So you couple these statistics
with the country's lack of protections for the LGBTQ plus community, and it's clear to me that we need to do more to address these mental health disparities. Questions for Dr. Lopez. Can you discuss the factors that contribute to these higher rates of mental health challenges, and what would be the...
Maybe because they got mental health challenges only because when you get to the hospital, you don't know what the fuck you is. You want to identify as one thing, but when they take you in the back room, you're totally something different. So it's a whole bunch of confusion and stuff that these people spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on their education. What make you think that they want to put up with a bunch of bullshit that they didn't learn nothing about? Maybe that's the reason why you ain't getting the Medicaid or the Medicare and all that shit. I'm just saying.
Impact of tailoring and providing more mental health services and support for LGBT plus youth?
It is very well known in the literature that discrimination is a main determinant of poor mental health outcomes in LGBT.
It's my turn. She's the only black person up there. Yes, she is representing black folks, black women. No, she's not representing black folks and black women. She is absolutely representing lesbians, gays, and trans. She's not speaking up for black women themselves. She's against that. She's speaking up for the other side. And looking goofy as hell, boy, with them small fishbowl glasses she got on and shit. Sounding real crazy. She can't even answer most of these questions.
Youth, there is no question that discrimination, as has been discussed, against LGBT youth has increased over the last few years. And that is
Oh, you missed Cory Booker a minute ago, man.
That is a driver or worsening mental health in LGBT youth.
I think he's trying to come out the closet.
Mental health is needed in LGBT youth for sure, but we also need to work on the social aspects that drives that mental health issue, which is discrimination.
Thank you. And it seems that unfortunately, as we should be providing more and stronger protections and support, too many jurisdictions across the country seem to be going backwards and putting LGBTQ plus youth in more vulnerable and dangerous circumstances. The next question I have is not a technical one, not a deep policy question, but I want to talk to you for a minute, Harley. Appreciate you being here today and your courage to speak up and to share. You've shared a lot with the committee, and I'm glad you're sacrificing a bit of what should be your summer vacation to be here. You've talked about the love and support you received from your parents and doctors and friends. For any of your peers who may be watching today, thinking about maybe how to talk to their parents, how to talk to their friends, maybe not in as welcoming or comforting of a circumstance as you were blessed to have, what words of encouragement would you offer to them, given your experience and given your advocacy?
The main thing I would want to convey to them is that they are not alone. Whenever I started my journey, I had just entered middle school, and as I said, I had to move to online school because of bullying. And I was in a very dark place, and I felt very alone. I had no friends. I just had my parents who were luckily supportive, but as a child, you feel so isolated. And so one of the things that helped me was getting involved in my community. My parents took me to our local PFLAG, which is Parents and Friends of Lesbians.
And I hate to say this, but we have to watch those kind of stories too, because these stories are manipulating so many times that I see a lot of these stories be used by other people because they know that excuse works. I'm not saying on this situation, but plenty of other different situations, not with this LGBT or anything like that. But some people know that that's a weapon that can be used, you know what I'm saying, that it can get you some attention, you know what I'm saying. They'll jump right in and use the same kind of excuse, knowing damn well they was out there flipping around with everybody else and stuff. But then when it comes down to it, once you get a little older, you gotta explain this shit used in a dark place and this and that. Yeah, get the fuck out of here. No, you wasn't. Hell no, you were doing backflips off the swings with everybody else.
lesbians and gays. It was a group of people who was just a roundtable of queer members of the community and allies who just came together to share their experiences and just have a good time. And I was scared going to that meeting, but as soon as I got there, I felt so welcomed, and it was the first time I did not feel alone. And so that's why I'm here today, to tell those trans kids that they are not alone, that I accept them, and so many other people accept them for who they are, because it's not a choice. And
what's tripping me out is the men behind him and beside him. I almost said her or he, whatever this thing is. But they just are grinning. They just loving this story, man. It's like, are you serious? I understand that she been through something, you know what I'm saying? I don't mean to crack jokes on her if she did go or he went through this or whatever. You know what I'm saying? See, they trying to confuse the fuck out of me, and I don't like being fucking confused. I get mad when I'm confused. But they a little too happy, you know what I'm saying?
that regardless of what people say to you, just remember who you are and stick to that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Padilla. Senator Lee?
Thank you. Ms. Gaines, I'd like to start with you if I could. And thanks again for sharing your...
Serious ass, you got a wrench. Time yourself out. That's not a she. That's a he. They got you too. Damn. They confusing our brain cells, man. They confusing our brain cells.
Story. I've been touched and saddened to hear of the misogynistic and discriminatory treatment that you received from the NCAA, which I regard as nothing short of shameful. You've handled it with grace and courage, and I appreciate that example that you're setting for so many women and girls across America. Your story reminded me of a letter that I received from a constituent a couple of years ago. A constituent who explained to me her own story with girls and women's athletics. She explained that she would never have been able to go to college, never would have had a chance at a college education had she not done so under an athletic scholarship. And while she was in college, she became the most dominant female track athlete in the state of Utah. And she was a two-time All-American sprinter who held the 100-meter record at BYU for 22 years. She told me that even at the height of her collegiate year, as one of the top female sprinters in the country, she would sometimes go to help her dad, who coached high school track, and she would go to those events with her dad. She said even then, the high school boys could beat her because of biological differences between people who are born male and people who are born female. So what would you say to all the high school female athletes who worry about losing potential college scholarships? To say nothing of the world in which we now face name, image, likeness, endorsements, things like that, all the things that they might forego as a result of having to compete for scholarships, endorsements, and notoriety with people who were born male.
My message would be that it's not transphobic to acknowledge how women deserve respect, how we deserve safety, how we deserve fairness, we deserve keeping our dignity. It's not transphobic to say that. It's not transphobic to say that you can't change your sex. Sex is down to a chromosomal level, and that's not something that can be changed, and that matters in sports. Your biology, sports is the one area where your sexual chromosomes matter. And again, I'll echo Harley's message as well, as you're not alone. The overwhelming majority of people regarding this issue of fairness in women's sports agree that having men in women's sports is wrong and that it's unfair and it's a violation to, again, our privacy and rights to safety as women. So that would be my message, to be bold, be empowered, and before anything, stand firm in the truth, biologically.
Serious, if I take your wrench, how you gonna time yourself out? See, that don't work that way, you know what I'm saying? You gotta keep it now.
Truth.
Are you transphobic, Riley?
That is simply not true.
Do you hold anything against transgendered persons?
Absolutely not. I agree Leah Thomas was following the rules set in place by the NCAA, and I have no problem with Leah Thomas. I do believe there's a bit of selfishness and narcissism and entitlement surrounding this person in regards to the utter disregard that Thomas displayed for us in these situations. But I have no animosity towards Thomas. My problem is the NCAA. My problem is the Biden administration pushing a rewrite of Title IX. That is my problem, and that's why I'm here. That's why this issue has become political for me, because I realize that legislation is the way you curb these things. I can't believe it's come to this, but I have no hate in my heart towards anyone, even the protesters who mobbed me. The first thing that I did was prayed for them. I saw the soullessness, the vengeance, the violence in their eyes, and they do it in the name of love and inclusion and acceptance and tolerance and welcoming and embracing diversity, but they did not embrace my diverse thought. That to me was what hate looked like. Nothing in my...
Did the NCAA embrace your diversity? Tell me what attempts that the NCAA made to accommodate you and other female swimmers who felt uncomfortable sharing an open locker room with a biological male.
Nothing. They actually made us feel guilty for feeling as if we were uncomfortable. Time and time again, that's what we saw. There was even a group of girls who undressed in the janitor's closet. They changed clothes in the janitor's closet because they felt more comfortable undressing in that environment than they did undressing next to someone with male gaze.
And were they doing that because they were transphobic?
They were doing it because they were violated.
Tell me how they were violated.
I think 2, 3, 4 years ago, if a man claims the identity of simply saying they are a woman, walks into a locker room, a DA would follow this man into a locker room, arrest him, and he's charged with sexual harassment, voyeurism, indecent exposure, and the list goes on. But this was celebrated. This was encouraged. Leah Thomas was then nominated for NCAA Woman of the Year, which is an award that I was also nominated for. But when I saw the full list of nominees and saw that NCAA Woman of the Year was not exclusive to just women, the award was immediately devalued and meaningless to me. That's how they were honoring this, rather than making us feel reassured in our feelings that this was wrong.
When you accommodate men time and time again, refusing to accommodate women, we call that misogyny. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Lee. Next up is Senator Blumenthal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Robinson, your testimony is really powerful on the issue not only of anti-LGBTQ plus legislation, but also the threats of violence and hate crimes. And you described this entire emergency as a result of a coordinated moral panic. The reference to this emergency is unprecedented in 50 years of the Human Rights Campaign, which itself is noteworthy. I wonder if you could describe the links here that make it coordinated, that create the threat of violence, the feeling that this community is, to quote you, constantly under threat, and what relation it is to gun violence in particular at Pulse
that might
and
be a
Club
good
Q.
question right there.
Refer to both of those. If you could just expound on your testimony a little bit in that regard.
Absolutely. And I think that, those real life examples of Pulse and Club Q show that this violent political rhetoric plus easy access to firearms equals real life harm, violence, death to my community. And while we're here talking about the issues that are truly affecting children, their health and their safety, the number one thing we should be talking about is gun violence. That is the number one killer of America's youth. But instead, we are putting a target on the backs of trans kids. And when it comes to where this is coming from, we don't have to guess. I mean, the American Principles Project, their executive director said that they are targeting trans kids to, quote, score political points. And every time we see these waves of anti-LGBTQ plus legislation move through states, over 500 bills just this year, we see it accompanied by campaigns of hate and bias online.
That's Mr. Blumenthal. That is Blumenthal. Don't ask me where he got that last name from, boy. I hate to grow up with that one.
In Florida, when the Don't Say Gay or Trans bill was moving through, you saw a 400% increase in language of groomers online targeting the LGBTQ plus community. Let's be clear that this is instilling fear in people. This is perpetuating transphobia and homophobia that has real life impact on harm on the lives of my community.
Would you say that a lot of the rhetoric, the legislation, in a sense, gives license to the violence or encourages it implicitly, maybe without directly intending it, but nonetheless creates an atmosphere where the violence is more likely to flourish?
Absolutely. There was a speaker at CPAC that called for the quote-unquote eradication of transgender. That sort of violent language takes away the humanity of people that look like me, the people experience the world like me, LGBTQ plus people across this country. It makes us seem
If that's the kind of rhetoric that starts that, what you think the people that she's representing did for the last 4 years when they wanted to off the last guy? I mean, they've been out to try to get this guy man since he won. All kind of threats and shit all over social media about this guy. What's going on, 6ix9ine? Thank you for joining. But they've been making threats like this for the last 5 or 6 years against one guy. So it was right for them to do it. but it ain't cool for the pendulum to swing the other way. This is what we mean by all that stuff that they pull is going to come back and bite them in the ass.
Less human. When you couple that with trying to censor education, remove our stories from schools, trying to criminalize or vilify loving parents for affirming their gender identity, this is creating a culture of fear and harm that's directly targeted at some of.
I had to stop this big motherfucker again. Taking your stories out of school, they took a lot of things out of school to put your stuff in. They took out math. They took out science, most definitely, if you're having this conversation. You took out Black history, you took out a lot of things and replaced it with books that's teaching little girls on how to suck dudes off. You put in books that showing kids how to be what you're talking about. This is what she's standing up for. I forgot who asked me that question. It's my turn. This is what she's talking about. It's straight craziness right here. And by the way, that's a dry ass damn weave, boy, I'm telling you.
Of our most vulnerable, the LGBTQ plus community and trans youth. We should all see what's happening for the moral crisis that it is and know that because the attack is coming to trans youth today doesn't mean that that target can't be placed on someone else's back next week. This is a threat not only for the trans community, but for us all.
I think that's a really important point, that we are all at risk of this violence if the LGBTQ plus community can be targeted in this way. Anyone can be targeted. Anyone who's different is at risk. And this community right now is the most vulnerable, but others can be targeted as well. Senator Hirono and I have helped to lead hate crimes legislation, which actually has taken as one of its principal causes to stop exactly this kind of violence. And so I want to thank you for your leadership and look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you very much. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to all of our witnesses here today. Ms. Robinson, I want to file.
Before Senator Kennedy even talk, I'm going to name him the MVP. He's going to make somebody look stupid. I'm not sure which one he's going to make look stupid, but this dude is hilarious. If you want to find some funny shit one day just to watch, go punch up Senator Kennedy and watch. Man, this dude is hilarious, man, in Washington, D.C.
Follow up by trying to understand your answer to one of Senator Cruz's questions. And this is really a question, not a suggestion. Do I understand your position to be that there are two sexes, but there can be more than two genders?
I wouldn't even say two, and we've got Dr. Lopez here as well, but there's also the definition of intersex. I think that often in these conversations we're conflating sex and gender, and I do want to affirm here that trans women are women. That is their gender.
Okay, but I'm trying to understand. Do you make a distinction between sex and gender?
Thank you for joining us
Yes, sir.
this afternoon.
Okay, explain that. Just, do you think there are more than two sexes?
I believe that there's a definition for intersex as well that I want to acknowledge. But sex is assigned at birth.
Three? I'm just trying to understand. I'm thoroughly confused. So you're born, I'm talking about biology, male, female, and what else?
I believe that intersex is also acknowledged. But again, I'm not a doctor here. What I can
and
say
what does intersex mean?
Is that there's a difference between sex and gender. And I think in these conversations we're conflating the two.
Well, but I want to start with sex. Okay, there's male. There's female. When a baby's born, before the baby has had time to even have a sense of self, there's male, female, and intersex. There's a third sex.
I believe that is true, but I would defer to Dr. Lopez as I'm not a physician.
Okay. And how many genders are there?
I think the gender is expansive, and the definitions are always growing. Today I can tell you, I talk to young people that talk about non-binary as
more than five.
I think the gender is not a binary, is what I'm trying to say.
Are there more than five genders?
I thought the root word binary had something to do with math. I'm gonna have to look that up after the show. I don't think I end up messing the feed up if I try to look for it now. Too much going on. But I thought binary has something to do with math.
Trying to understand. Are there more than 5 genders?
Well, I mean, I think that there was a time where women wearing pants didn't feel like it was appropriate for their gender, and yet I'm wearing pants today. I think that there are ways that we express our
there more
gender
than
that are
5
expansive.
genders? Are there more than 5?
I wouldn't subject myself to naming how many genders we have women wearing pants.
5 genders. I'm just trying to understand. Are there more than 5 genders?
Well, I mean, I think that there was a time where women wearing pants didn't feel like it was appropriate for their gender, and yet I'm wearing pants today. I think that there are ways that we express our
Are there
gender
more
that
than
are
5
expansive.
genders? Are there more than 5?
I wouldn't subject myself to naming how many genders there are, but what I can say is that.
So is she saying just because now women can wear pants, that means she can be a man? Watch out for these women in these pantsuits. What in the hell?
An
Gender's
infinite
reflection.
number?
Excuse me?
There's an infinite number of genders?
I think depending on your culture, there are a lot of different genders that exist. And I can also say that it's a term that's evolving. If you look at young people today, they really don't lean into the binary of only woman and man. So I think that it's incumbent upon us not to legislate on this, but create space for them to explore what their identities are, what their gender identities are.
All I know is if this thinking is in school and it gets deep down into our community, we ain't got to worry about fixing the black community. It'll be over. You already see how a lot of these young girls act now. With this kind of dumbness on top of that, I'm just saying.
Let's get back to athletics. I think I understand what you're saying. There are 3 sexes, male, female, and intersex.
I believe that to be true, but again, I'm not a physician.
And there are an infinite number of genders, because gender is a mental state.
Gender is about expression, and I think that there are a variety of ways that you can express your gender.
Okay, so there's infinite number. All right, let's go back to the biology. Male, female, boy, girl. Okay, biologically, do males have an advantage over females biologically in sports?
Again, I'm not a physician, and I can't speak to that.
What's your real world experience?
So she's not a doctor and not a physician. What the fuck is she doing there in front of the damn Senate? She just a good for nothing. The fuck?
It depends. I mean, there are some people who are born male that I'm faster than if I were to sprint against them, and some that I'm not. Some males that are taller than some women, and some that are
You don't
shorter.
believe that a biological male has a physical advantage in sports over a biological female?
Not as a definitive statement.
Give me an example. Well, no, I don't think. How many female members of the NBA do you see?
Well, I can say that, there's been this news article about men that think that they could beat Serena Williams in tennis, right? That they think that they could actually score a point on her. And it's just not the case. She is stronger than that.
What's your experience, Ben? Male, female?
Both Serena and Venus lost to the 200.
Oh, damn. There it goes. Somebody about to break it down. Because I was about to get her ass.
Tennis, right? That they think that they could actually score a point on her. And it's just not the case. She is stronger than that.
What's your experience, Ben? Male, female?
Both Serena and Venus lost to the 203rd ranked male tennis player, which they're phenoms for women. My experience, my husband, he swam at University of Kentucky as well. In terms of accolades and in terms of national ranking, I was a much better swimmer than him. He could kick my butt any day of the week without trying.
Okay. I just think, Ms. Robinson, I'm trying to understand where you're coming from. I think you lose a lot of credibility when you don't concede that a biological male has physical advantages over a biological female. I mean, I just think that's a proven fact, and you really hurt your credibility. I understand.
That black girl that Saturday afternoon, the TV movies of Sheena and Shira and Xena got there go to her head, boy. I don't know what the fuck she talking about.
And you want the world to be a better place. I do too, and I don't think people ought to be discriminated against because of an immutable characteristic. I don't. And I think that I think everybody ought to be free to be themselves. And what you do in your bedroom or what I do in my bedroom with a consenting adult is nobody's business. But if what I do in my bedroom with a consenting adult, if I decide I want to tell somebody's child about it, then other people have rights too. And I think parents have rights. And I think biological females have rights to be able to compete fairly in sport. In sports. So I really think you hurt your credibility when you refuse to acknowledge that biological males have an advantage over biological females. It kind of makes me wonder about all your testimony. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
What I'm trying.
That was the nail in the coffin right there, boy. Take it back about 20 seconds there. That was the nail in the coffin. Shut her right on up. She shouldn't have nothing else to say for the rest of the hearing.
Be able to compete fairly in sport. In sports. So I really think you hurt your credibility when you refuse to acknowledge that biological males have an advantage over biological females. It kind of makes me wonder about all your testimony. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
What I'm trying to say is that there is not a definitive advantage in all cases. Sir, I don't know if you believe that you could beat Serena Williams in tennis, but I probably think that that's not the case. There are not all cases where all men are physically superior to all women. And at the end of the day, in this conversation, we're not talking about that. We're talking about trans women who are, in fact, women, who deserve to play in a gender that matches their sports, who deserve all the benefits that Ms. Gaines is talking about. And as a cisgender black woman, I can say definitively that my womanhood is not threatened by a transgender person asserting hers as well.
Senator Hirono.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thank all of the persons who are testifying today. For Ms. Robinson, do you know what percentage of women's sports consists of transgender participants?
It is a very small number. I can say that that the Williams Institute has estimated about 300,000 trans youth total in the United States. That's less than a percentage of a percent. And when some of these laws pass in places like Utah, they are putting into place broad sports bans that ban kids from playing as early as the age of 5 years old. In Utah specifically, when the governor explored more about that piece of legislation, he last year called it cruel because it actually only impacted 4 trans students in the state and only 1 trans girl. So we know that there's a very small percentage of trans women that are actually playing in sports that these bills are targeting.
So
now they're going to attack Utah for that, just like they attack Florida for other things. It's like they just want their way. They coming in throwing helicopter blows and shit, trying to pave their own way. From what I'm seeing.
You know, I hardly know what to say because I would think that human rights belong to everyone and that trans rights are human rights, and I think we must do more to ensure that the trans community and the LGBTQ plus community more broadly can live as their authentic selves, free from the threat of and real violence or discrimination. So, Ms. Walker, thank you very much for being here. Do you play in sports? Do you participate or compete in sports?
I do not.
So would you say that most, I would think that most transgender girls are not competing in sports, but you just want to be able to be free from these kinds of totally discriminatory laws that does not allow you to be yourself?
Yeah, that's definitely the case. Whereas I don't personally compete in sports, so I can't speak for the trans kids that do compete in sports. I will say that it's even more scary for us in situations like that, because can you imagine somebody like me having to compete in a men's sports team? That would be detrimental to my mental health, and I would feel unsafe. And so I think things like the Equality Act are necessary to protect these trans people from discrimination, because I have the right as a woman, just as Ms. Gaines has the right as a woman to compete in women's sports. And just because I wasn't born in a female body doesn't mean I don't have that same right.
Thank you. And as long as we're focusing on sports, of course, we know that there are huge differences in so-called male sports and the support that's given to male sports and so-called male athletes versus women's sports. And there's all kinds of data about the discrimination in these so-called male and so-called female sports. In fact, one of my colleagues, who is very much opposed to transgender persons competing in female sports, said if we allow transgender persons to compete in against females, that we're going to see coaches encouraging boys to become transgender to compete against girls. Ms. Robinson, is this what's happening in sports?
No, it is not. There is an incredible process that people have to go through to come out that can be painful, that's about exposing yourself to your family, to your friends in different ways. I can't imagine someone enduring all of that simply to play a sport. These are people that are only trying to live, as Harley has told us, to play sports that match their gender identities so that they can get all the positive benefits that we've talked about: self-esteem building, self-confidence, the ability to work within a team. I just can't see why we would deny that opportunity to children as young as 5 years old.
One last question. So we have all of these laws, Don't Say Gay and other kind of laws. Maybe this is a question for Dr. Lopez. As you work with the transgender community, LGBTQ persons, so what do these kinds of bans on books, what kind of impact do they have on the persons that you treat?
Well, these are, one has to remember that transgender children and adolescents are already a vulnerable population. They have to make an extra effort compared to non-transgender children to socialize, to feel like they belong, to participate in sports, which they have the right to, as Harley said. And if there's already a climate of you can be targeted, you will be treated differently, these kids tend to isolate themselves. I have patients who have no friends, like 0 friends. I have patients that just do online or homeschool because they're terrified about going to school, let alone participate in sports. That can be terrifying for them. And I have one patient that I saw last week that the mom told me is a 12-year-old who plays soccer, and it's not competitive, it's just with the school. And she told me, this bill is going to be devastating for my child. I will have to move out of state if the bill that bans sports participation passes, because that has kept my child alive. That was the thing that helped me engage and feel accepted with peers. So yes, all this climate is really harming the social life and the growth of my patients, of these kids.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Whitehouse.
How can she be a doctor and not come in there showing proof that that is true? I'm just asking.
Thanks very much. Appreciate this hearing, Chairman. Appreciate the panel being here. Dr. Lopez, I don't know if I had my own hearing in another committee that I chair, so I'm coming late to this one. I apologize if this is a repeat question. But I wonder if there is an age or a phase of life when young people begin to experience some uncertainty about their gender identity.
There is no specific age. People can experience.
The specific age for them, to answer them correctly, is preschool. And if you ain't paying attention to what your kids got on TV and on YouTube and stuff like that, it could start there, 1, 2 years old and stuff. You know what I'm saying? A lot of these shows ain't right. I noticed this about 7, 8 years ago with my own. It made her turn off the Disney Channel. You know what I'm saying? Especially turn off the Cartoon Network after a certain time. You know what I'm saying? Nickelodeon, none of that stuff is safe no more and stuff. You know what I'm saying? So the ages start when they start pumping that shit to them, or we're not paying attention and just putting them in front of things while we getting things done. You know what I'm saying?
That their gender is different as young as 2 when they start talking, but by adolescence, most people who identify as transgender do realize that their gender is different, and very often puberty is a trigger to realize this is not my gender, because they're experiencing physical changes that do not feel consistent with them and their gender.
Yeah, so I think a lot of people's experience is that puberty is a rather hard time of life for a lot of kids, entirely apart from gender identity. Is that supported by any evidence? And that being a teenager is a hard time of life, irrespective of gender identity, that adolescence is a difficult, awkward time of life. Is there any evidence to support those propositions, or is that just my anecdotal experience?
So I'm not a mental health provider, so I am not sure what specific data exists to show that adolescence is a difficult time. But as a pediatrician, I do, see that adolescents, children and adolescents need a lot of support from parents, from the community, to find who they are in different ways. Social connection is very important, and parental connection is very important in adolescence. That's just a general concept.
Yeah. And I doubt that many of us in this
How
room
come that's only been an issue
like
for
to
the last couple
go
of years,
back
though?
and relive our
Kids
teenage
were
years.
perfectly fine before all this stuff showed up.
So if you accept the proposition that that period of adolescence and the onset of puberty and, being a teenager and all of that is a difficult, challenging, and awkward time of life, presumably it gets a lot worse when you add to all of the questions that kids experience in that phase of their lives, the additional question, concern, uncertainty, awareness that you've got a different gender identity.
Yeah, so actually one of the benefits of gender-affirming care is to not have to worry about their gender. So it allows children to go on with their lives, go to school, do the normal kids or social activities that they want to do without to worry about their gender. Because if they're going through a puberty that feels wrong with them, they will not be comfortable in their skin to engage with peers, to go to school, to do the normal things that kids want to do, because they're thinking about their gender all the time and thinking that they're not comfortable in their skin.
So this is at least.
But the question is, when the fuck did they start thinking like that? Because we didn't always think like that. It's like if somebody put you in front of it, goddamn, that's the only way that you're gonna start questioning things. You know what I'm saying? Just a dumbass doctor. I wonder if she a real doctor.
Initially, mostly happening with kids, right? Awareness of uncertainty about their gender or awareness that they are in the wrong gender. That's
Well, it happens to transgender adults as well,
but mostly it's kids.
and transgender adults.
Yeah.
Or she went through doctor school and just answered the questions as like she wanted to, or they wanted to, gave them the answers they wanted to, but she didn't believe none of that stuff. How in the hell are you a doctor?
Yeah. And it just seems to me that when we're dealing with a population that includes so many children, that coming at this from a perspective of kindness and love and support is the thing that just we ought to be doing as fellow human beings. And at least that's the message I take away from this hearing. There's just no point being mean to these kids. They've got enough going on already.
If I can say something,
Please.
these are the bravest kids, just like Harley here. You can see how brave she is. These are the bravest kids there are, because they have to fight every day to be themselves.
Yeah.
And when they feel like they're losing the fight, that's when they get depressed and commit suicide. And it takes also a lot of courage for these patients to go against the world, really, to advocate for their kids, to support them. So these are really good, loving parents that just want their kids to be happy and do the normal things that kids do.
And other grown-ups trying to score points off of all of that just strikes me as being very unfortunate behavior.
It's
Thank you.
terribly unfair. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Senator Whitehouse. Senator Ossoff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to our panelists for joining us today, to all of you for your testimony and your courage in speaking publicly and speaking before the Senate. I think it's worth just stepping back and acknowledging the tremendous stress and anxiety that so many across the country are dealing with for so many reasons, but that without question, as we see in survey after survey, as we see from mental health professionals, from psychologists, psychiatrists, counselors, that LGBTQ youth are experiencing, particularly in a political and cultural environment where, as we've discussed today, these issues are being hotted up and exploited to score cheap political points and to divide people. And when we see vulnerable people targeted by powerful politicians for the purposes of dividing people and gaining power, with reckless disregard for the impact that it has on particular children and young people who are struggling, who are bullied, who are marginalized, who are bravely grappling to reconcile themselves and how they feel about themselves with the expectations of family and society, and then a political environment is imposed upon them in which they're made the center of attention and a focus of criticism and hatred. Children. I think it's worth just stepping back and powerful people in the U.S. Senate reflecting on the impact of our words, our deeds, our statements. Ms. Robinson, I have some data here from Georgia. Would like your view on it. Recent data from the Trevor Project. 72% of LGBTQ youth in Georgia experiencing serious anxiety, 59% symptoms of depression, 46% seriously considering suicide within the last year. Can you comment on the impact it has on vulnerable and marginalized youth when they're made political targets in this endless partisan power struggle in the nation's capital?
It's absolutely devastating. It's devastating the ways that we've put a target on the back of trans youth. And I think about the history of my movement. When the AIDS epidemic came to the forefront in the 80s, by the early 90s, you had lost a whole generation of gay men. I don't want us to repeat that story with our trans youth. This is a time where we can offer them the support, the resources, the affirmation and validity of their existence to ensure that they survive. And when they do, we get people that are as whole and as happy as folks like Harley at the end of this table. This is a real opportunity for us to ensure that the most vulnerable among us is protected because our rights and our civil liberties are intertwined.
And Ms. Robinson, in addition to the impact on the mental health, the sense of whether or not one's community and society is welcoming and loving and kind, or whether one is being turned into a target and a bargaining chip between political parties in a struggle for power. It's, of course, not just the impact on the individual's mental health, but it's the risk of being targeted by a violent act or a hate crime. Additional data nationwide, according to the FBI, nearly 1 in 5 hate crimes in 2021 were motivated by anti-LGBTQ bias. Between 2017 and 2020, DOJ data demonstrating extreme levels of violence against LGBTQ persons across the country. Again, I'm asking you, please, to remind the Senate.
That's bullshit. Why he only used those 2 years? What was it looking like in 2016? What was it looking like in 2008? I mean, I just want to know. He want to give out the last 2-3 years when y'all try to push this shit through, but you ain't giving out the whole stat sheet. Funny looking fuck.
That what we do here has a powerful impact on people's sense of well-being and on the risk they face of violence. Can you comment on the risk of violence, please?
Absolutely. I mean, I talk to people every day that are living in a space of feeling isolated and feeling fearful for their very lives. I talk to Black trans women who, again, have experienced another deadly year, and they talk about going out the house to walk their dog or go to school and being fearful that will be the day they don't get to go home again. I talk to parents of trans youth that are fleeing their state because they feel that their family and their child will not be safe and will not get to grow into an adult. This is a crisis, and the hardest part is that this is a crisis that is man-made, that the people can solve for by stopping these bad pieces of legislation and stopping the violent rhetoric that take away.
This stupid black. Hold on. Let me go back. Let me understand this one. 15 seconds.
State because they feel that their family and their child will not be safe and will not get to grow into an adult. This is a crisis. And the hardest part is that this is a crisis that is man-made, that the people can solve for by stopping these bad pieces.
How is this a crisis and not what your communities are going through? They did this before. She said this before. So no, she is not for us and she's not for women. Transgenders is a crisis. I'm starting to think that she might be a man herself.
Pieces of legislation and stopping the violent rhetoric that take away the humanity of trans people in the LGBTQ plus community.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Welch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank all of the witnesses for being here. You've been tremendous, and I mean every single one of you, because we're dealing with issues that really affect people in a very personal way. Ms. Walker, thank you for your courage. Thank you for your coming forward and telling us your story and sharing that. And I want to say thank you to every one of you. You know, this whole challenge that we have as a society, and it's not unique to the U.S. society, of defining people who are other as less entitled to be fully accepted, has been an ongoing situation that we face throughout our history. You know, recently in Vermont, we were the first state to pass civil unions, and our incumbent governor who signed that bill nearly lost his re-election. And many of the arguments that are being made here about why that would be so bad dissolved because once the law was passed and people were together, then what before had been seen as wrong, we were allowed to see what love existed between these people who got a civil union. And then a few years later, Vermont was the fourth state to pass marriage. And what Senator Ossoff was talking about is kind of a dynamic, I think, that is only cured by acceptance. You know, none of us know what shoes each of us walks in. We just know we're all trying to figure out life and who we are and how we can be who we are and be fully engaged in being a generous, open, and loving person to everyone else. So the Equality Act, I think, is so important because it essentially acknowledges with the force of law that LGBTQ plus folks are entitled to the same rights and protections as everyone else. So that's my statement here, but it's a statement of appreciation about each of you being here. Because I'm talking to you, Mr. Sharp, and you, Ms. Gaines, as well, because these are gripping issues for everyone. But I come down on the side of just accept what people's struggles are, and there's a lot of power in acceptance. But I just want to ask you, Ms. Walker, if you want to say anything else about the just extraordinary issues you had to go through as you had this emerging sense of who you were. It was not quite right to fit who you thought you were and wanted to be and were entitled to be. But that's not an easy decision to make, to start walking down that road.
You know, coming out, like was said earlier by Dr. Lopez and Ms. Robinson, coming out is such a difficult process for so many LGBTQ people. And for me, I was lucky to be able to have such a supporting family and supportive friends as well. But that's not the case for so many other LGBTQ Americans. And I came out in a time where, you know, trans people, this was before any of the anti-trans legislation was being introduced, and it was still difficult for me, but I can't imagine trans kids that are coming out in this modern era of hate, name-calling, and violence by these state legislators, being called demons, groomers, everything like that. And, you know, me being called out by my state legislation and Alabama governor, who is elected to represent everybody in their state, everybody in their district, attacking those people for just simply being who they are is disgusting. And so having something like the Equality Act to protect those kids that don't have such a big support system and stop the incredibly violent rhetoric that is being introduced is incredibly important.
Thank you very much. Dr. Lopez, I mean, you deal with kids, and whatever, and we were all kids once, but is some law that tells a child or a young teen, young adult, who they can or can't be going to be persuasive to that person who's going through some of the internal struggles that people go through to fully realize their own identity, with a law that imposes, that prohibits them from exploring who they want to be, have any chance of working versus acceptance?
I'm going to try to understand your question. Do you mean if with the laws that are being passed, gender affirming care, your question is, what are their chances of those children?
Well, I'm out of time, so I'm going to have to, I didn't ask that very well, but I'm out of time and I'm going to yield back. Thank you very much.
I thank you, Senator Welsh, and I have to go vote on a roll call that's about to come to an end, so I'm going to have to bring this to a close at this, but I want to say two or three things, having sat through the entire hearing and listened to all the questions. We ended up with 3 issues here. The first issue was violence, and I hope we can all agree and nod. Violence is an unacceptable expression in a democracy. There are ways to express yourself through speech and press and voting and otherwise. Violence is unacceptable, whether it's at a San Francisco college or whether it's in the classrooms of high school.
I'm getting real tired of that word democracy. I think that might be one of my next shows. Is what the fuck is democracy? I'm tired of them using that shit for an excuse, because that's not what I'm seeing what this shit started as. I don't give a fuck who bought it in. I don't give a fuck about what time it was. I don't give a fuck about none of that shit. I think they pulling our leg on a lot of this fucking democracy shit. I'm just saying. It gets under my skin a little bit.
In Alabama, or whether it's the victims of LGBTQ hate crimes, which sadly are increasing. Unacceptable, both sides of the table. That's one thing. The second thing is, we have two issues that have emerged here. One is an issue with Ms. Walker. I was so concerned about your coming here today, really. I didn't have to be. You're terrific. You really have poise and make a presentation that is very powerful. It speaks well of you and certainly of your family that stood behind you while you made this difficult transition in life. But what we're talking about is the other Harley Walkers across the United States, and whether they will have the same opportunity for medical care, good professional medical care based on science and medicine. Our state legislatures will step in and say, we don't want the family to make this decision. We'll make it for you. I think that's wrong. As I said at the outset, parents have a responsibility in life and death decision making. And I think what's clear is there's basic misunderstanding about the care that's being given to gender affirmation. I think Dr. Lopez clarified that today. The notion that little kids are on their way to surgery or that medicines are being dispensed with abandon just doesn't bear any credence when you look at the organizations that support the current method of gender affirming care. American Medical Association, Academy of Pediatrics. And finally, Ms. Gaines, I get it. I understand why you feel as you do. You dedicated a big part of your life in an extraordinary way to a sport. And something happened along the way which has seared your memory of that experience and leads you to speak out. But there's got to be a way for us as Americans to enter into a conversation that doesn't protect your rights at the expense of our witness from Alabama. There has to be a way we can find that is respectful of transgender individuals and respectful of what you have done with your life and the professionalism you brought to it. That's up to us on this side of the table, as I said earlier. I wasn't sure about this hearing, but I am sure now. I'm glad we had it. I'm glad you all had a chance to testify and answer the questions, and we had such a fulsome cooperation and participation by all the members of the committee. We have the power to make the promise of equal justice under the law a reality. That's our job in the Senate Judiciary Committee and in the Senate. So let's use this power to protect everyone, especially the LGBTQ families, and our fundamental freedoms and our nation's future. With that, the committee will stand adjourned.
And there you have it right there. That's just part one right there. And yeah, a lot of things is getting up under my skin today, but that's just me. If it wasn't getting up under my skin, I wouldn't be the mad militant. You know what I'm saying? That's just how I deliver. That's what makes me mad. So, I want to thank everybody for coming out and joining me for this special on boys and women's sports. Actually, it's called something else. But I want to thank y'all for coming through, you know what I'm saying, sharing your opinions in the chat. This is just part one. Like I said, I'm coming back. There's more parts to this. I think a lot happened yesterday. So I'm going to kind of break it down a little bit because yesterday was 10 hours. I'm going to try to break it in half, so you might see me pop up in some odd times of the night or something like that, just to go over it if I'm bored or something like that. You know what I'm saying? So, and that's just what owls do, man. I need to get on my owl routine, man, of just being up all night. I'm starting to collect little stories and stuff on the back end and stuff, so what you call it, have us a nightly news nest. Damn, I just thought of that. I might keep that. But it's my turn. Thank you for coming. You know, I'm Series X. I always enjoy you in the chat. Gabe, well, King Gabe now. You know what I'm saying? I don't know when that started. I think it started about 2-3 days ago. You know what I'm saying? I see my boy D Sizzle join in. Mookie, thank you for coming through. 6ix9ine, thank you for coming through. E Brooks, it's always a good joy for you to come through there. Nene Nicole, and anybody I might have missed, I ain't doing it on purpose. You know what I'm saying? I could only stroll back but so far on this device. But I want to thank y'all. If you like this video, you know what I'm saying, make sure you hit the thumbs up. You know what I'm saying? Comment down on the bottom. Tell me what you think. Do you got kids that might have to go through this in schools, in sporting events and stuff? You know what I'm saying? Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell. If you want to donate and watch this channel grow, help this channel grow, donate $ Real Mad TV. Help me get some more extra equipment and stuff to bring you better, great shows. And more graphics too. I think I might work on some of my more graphics today. Why the screen want to mess up now? I think it hurt me. But let me get off this, see who's going next. If it ain't nobody going next, I'm gonna try to find something quick that we can run through real quick, a quick story in the news or something like that. So this won't be the last time you see me. You're gonna see me in the chat or you're gonna see me live again. So with that being said, thank y'all again. Let me see. And peace. Had to make sure the ending was set up right.